Everyone's ready. Let me know if you're not. Seeing no dissent, I will call to order the meeting of the Planning and Zoning Commission for Albany, California of Wednesday, July 13th, 2022. And I will note that for the record, all commissioners are present except for Commissioner Moman, who is absent and excused. And I will also read the land acknowledgement. The City of Albany recognizes that we occupy the land originally protected by the Confederated Villages of Lijan. We acknowledge the genocide that took place on these lands and must make strides to repay the moral debt that is owed to this indigenous people, specifically the Ohlone tribe. We thank them for their contributions, which have transformed our community and will continue to bring forth growth and unity. The City of Albany commits to sustaining ongoing relationships with the tribe and together build a better future for all that now make this their home. Okay, we've gone through items 1 and 2 on the agenda. Item 3 is ex parte communications. Do any commissioners have any ex parte communications to disclose? Commissioner Waddy.
Hi, yes. For item, I believe it is 7-3 on 1146 Evelyn Avenue. I just wanted to disclose that the project applicant was my realtor when I purchased my home in Albany, and I have become good friends with her. However, I have not spoken to her about the substance of this project since her application was filed. So I believe I can opine on it in a fair and judicious manner, but did want to just disclose that for the record.
Okay, thank you for that disclosure. Commissioner Donaldson. Okay, you're muted, Commissioner.
I didn't realize I was muted. I should say I talked to that same person when I did a site visit to look again at that site. Just a casual chat, didn't talk really about the application. Thank you. Mm-hmm.
Okay, thank you for that disclosure as well. All right. Anyone else? That would only be myself and Commissioner McLeod, and I have had none, and neither has Commissioner McLeod, it looks like. All right, so we will move on to the consent calendar, which will be enacted in one motion unless a member of the commission or the public wishes to pull an item for discussion. And there's 2 items, the last meeting minutes and the tentative parcel map. Oh, yes, and Director Bond, please go ahead.
Yes, good afternoon, everyone. Jeff Bond, the Community Development Director. Staff would like to pull the item 7.2 regarding the parcel map for 540 San Pablo Avenue. We apologize, but came to a mutual understanding with the applicant that we need to sort out some details on the storm drain associated with that project before asking the commission to take action on it. So we'd like to continue it to a date uncertain. It'll probably be in September, but we'd like to just go ahead and do that, have the commission consider it in September rather than this evening. If there is public comment on it, you should take that public comment. We did send out a notice to members of the public, so if there's someone here as a courtesy, we should probably receive their testimony. Thank you.
Okay, thank you for that. Let's see. Does anyone on the commission wish to discuss the minutes?
Nope.
Okay. Are there any attendees that wish to discuss either consent item, the minutes, or the parcel map? We will not be voting on the parcel map, item 4.2, another reminder. Okay, well, seeing no members of the public wishing to speak, we'll bring it back to the commission. And do I have a motion to accept the meeting minutes of June 22nd, 2022?
Sure. I can move approval of the minutes, and I'll move to continue the second item to a date uncertain.
I'll second that motion.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. That was item 4.2 is the second item. Any further discussion? If not, is there any dissent or abstention from this item? Otherwise, I'll consider it passed unanimously.
Okay. Mr. Chair, we do, excuse me. I thought we had a member of the public, but the hand went down. Never mind.
Okay, very good. Thank you. Okay, so then I will consider that passed unanimously, and we will move on from the consent calendar to any announcements and communications. And I believe Director Bond, you might have some announcements.
Yes, just wanted to update the commission, members of the public on some upcoming meetings. July is always a busy month for us because we're trying to squeeze in everything before our August recess. So next Monday, July 18th, the City Council will be considering the San Pablo Avenue specific plan at their regular meeting. As you know, that's a major work effort that you've been working on for a number of years now. So we're looking forward to that milestone. In addition, we have scheduled for you, the commission, a special meeting on Tuesday, July 19th, to review a draft of the draft housing element. We look forward to your input on that. And our plan is, following that meeting, to take it to the City Council at a special meeting, which will be on Tuesday, July 26th. And if things go to plan, they would then be considering your recommendation on that housing element. And we're hoping that we'll be in a place where we can forward that draft to the State Housing Community Development Department for their review over the next 3 or 4 months. Thank you very much.
Thank you. And I apologize, just to clarify, because I was a little distracted. The City Council will be considering the San Pablo Avenue specific plan on Monday, did you say?
Yes, this coming Monday, July 18th.
Okay, very good. All right, that does it for the announcements, unless there's any announcements or communication from any other staff or commission members. Seeing none, we'll move on to the public comment section for those wishing to address the commission on items not on the agenda. And I do see one hand raised, so please let them in and welcome.
Hi, good evening, everybody. This is Jeremiah. Yeah, so first public comment I want to mention is, I guess, the new way that Mr. Pilch does the attendance. I don't know if this is like an approved style or if this is a new way. You know that the chair says, "Oh, everybody's here minus this person." Okay, attendance is done. I mean, due to past practice, everybody's supposed to be able to say attendance for themselves. You know, I don't know if everybody's giving you permission to speak for them, or I mean, every other single commission and committee in Albany, every person is able to raise their hand and speak for themselves. City Council, Social and Economic Justice, Parks and Rec. I mean, this is the only one that Nick Pilch is like doing the attendance by himself. I just don't know how that started, or like who approved it or something. I mean, I see the only purpose of that is to maybe shorten the attendance 5 seconds. But I mean, it would just really be nice to hear everybody speak for themselves, because let's say you have a blind person or someone that can't see. It's just nice to hear commissioners' voices. It's just nice to hear people represent themselves and hear their voice. That's all. So I just don't know how that was approved or whatever. I mean, I'm okay with it. It's kind of neat, actually. It does move things along a little bit. So, I mean, to tell you the truth, I'm okay with it. It's kind of cool, actually. I don't know where you got it from. It's kind of a neat idea. So, I don't know. I like it. And at the same time, I still like to hear other people speak for themselves. I don't know, but I just want to bring that up. And then, so far as I had my hand up, but my service was cutting in and out. So no harm, no foul, no hard feelings. I was going to make a comment on the one on San Pablo about combining the lots. What is that going to do so far as property taxes? Is it going to make that owner pay less property taxes or more property taxes? I'm just not sure on that one. Oh, and also, so when we're doing all this San Pablo stuff, does each new building need to get a BAT survey? Because my dad owns real estate and he was talking about a BAT survey. Anything on Highway State 123, Caltrans is doing BAT surveys now. So I just want to know if every single field on San Pablo requires a BAT survey.
Thank you. Thank you for your comments. And I will note for the audience that the Brown Act limits the Commission's ability to take and or discuss items that are not on the agenda. Therefore, such items are normally referred to staff for comment or to a future agenda. And I don't see any other hands raised for this public comment section 6 of the agenda. So we'll go ahead and move on to section 7, which is discussion and possible action items on matters related to the following items. And the first one is 7-1 Solano Avenue Outdoor Dining Parklet Program Guidelines. Staff, please take it away. If you have a present.
Give us a moment to bring up our colleague, Michelle Plaus.
Certainly.
Should be on her way up. Here we go. So I think you've received presentations from Michelle in the past. She's part of our sustainability and transportation group and has been working with Justin Freed, myself, and other staff on our outdoor dining program. And I'd like to have her make the presentation this evening. We'll both help answer any questions you may have. So Michelle, take it away.
Jeff, let me share my screen here. Okay, hopefully everyone can see that all right. Sorry. Okay. Hi, everyone. Nice to see you all again. And as Jeff said, I'll be speaking about our proposed guidelines for our Parklet program today. Short agenda. I'll be going over a little bit of background and then chatting about the business and community surveys that we did a little while back. Then I'll discuss in detail the elements of our proposed guidelines, and finally talk a little bit about design review, which is really where you all come in the most. So sorry, I think it's still a little bit off here. Sorry about that. Okay. That's a little better. So to go way back to 2020, that's when outdoor dining first became permitted under a county public health order. And then the city started allowing in-street outdoor dining on Solano. And as you all probably remember, this was really kind of an emergency order when indoor dining was still not allowed. And so the program was really developed to be as easy and flexible as possible and to enable pretty much any business that wanted to participate to have a parklet. This is a map of the parklets on Solano. The ones in blue here are current parklets, and there are 3 in red that were permitted parklets and have since been removed. As you can see, they're really across the whole street, but there's a cluster on the western end of Solano. And since April, staff has been working with both the Transportation Commission and also the Economic Development Committee for several months to both review our survey that I'll talk about in a moment, and then also develop multiple iterations, concluding in the draft guidelines that we'll be presenting a little bit later on today. So to talk about the surveys a little bit, staff conducted 2 surveys between December and January. The first one was for all community members, And we actually received nearly 1,400 responses for that, which we were very pleased about. And then we also had a second survey that was specifically for businesses. We sent that to all businesses in Albany, as well as those Berkeley businesses that are in Albany's section of Solano Avenue. And we received 125 responses on that survey. And I won't go into all of the details of what we learned in the survey, but I'll give you all kind of the highlights. One of the main questions we asked was what people's opinion was on a potential permanent parklet program. And in the public survey in particular, we got an overwhelmingly supportive response. About 85% of people either supported or strongly supported a permanent parklet program. One of the main comments that we got was that they just added a really nice ambiance to the community and to Solano Avenue. A lot of people saying that it felt like Paris, or that it just kind of really created a nice vibe. And many people thought that the loss of parking was really not a problem, that they preferred having these sort of outdoor dining spaces instead. However, there were a contingent of people that were concerned about the reduction in parking, and also about the kind of the fairness of the process of taking what's really a public space and converting it into more of a private space for a business, and wanted to make sure that that was an open and fair process. And then there were also concerns about making sure that the parklets were safe and of more solid construction than we have right now. The business survey had pretty similar responses, still pretty strong support, but not quite as overwhelming. And some of the comments we had were that the parklets only benefited those that had an actual parklet, and that it reduced customer parking for other businesses, or that it was unfair that they weren't paying for extra square footage, which in the current program right now, they're not paying for the parklets. But there was also quite a bit of support for a permanent program, especially with a review process such as we've done. There were lots of businesses that said it was helpful, not just for the businesses with the parklets, but also by just kind of increasing traffic and having more people around their business. And again, the comment that safety and the kind of construction quality needed to be improved. We also did a section looking specifically at businesses on Solano, both non-restaurants and restaurants, and found that there was still support, although not an overwhelming amount. It was a little bit more than half of both non-restaurants and of just overall businesses on Solano supporting a program. So with that in mind, that's sort of what spurred us to develop this permanent program, and also to kind of, we involved a lot of the comments and feedback in our design of the guidelines. And one last piece of info from the survey was the feedback we got on design and aesthetics. This wasn't really a top priority for most of the people commenting, but we did receive a few comments about it. And in particular, the kind of main themes that we saw again and again were that the parklets should be aesthetic and have quality materials, that there should be some sort of basic guidelines or standards so that there would be consistency among the parklets, not necessarily all the same, but just sort of a similarity, and that a lot of people really wanted to see more plants and greenery around the parklets. So I just bring this up because that's sort of relevant to your role specifically. So now I'll go ahead and move into our actual guidelines, our proposed guidelines for the parklet program. And I'll speak in a little bit more detail about each of the bullets you see here. The first one is the location and setbacks for parklets. So we're proposing that parklets could be 1 to 2 parallel spaces or 2 to 3 angled spaces, with the proposal that for businesses that would like 3 spaces for a parklet, that would have to go through a planning and zoning review. There's also a proposal from the Economic Development Commission, but not the Transportation Commission, that if there's more than 40% of the parking spaces on a block being utilized by parklets, then future parklets should be limited to only 2 spaces. So that's the spaces. And then in terms of setbacks, we have a 1 foot setback from the travel lane and a 2 foot setback from a neighboring space on the driver's side, or 1 foot setback on the side otherwise. And then also a 2 foot setback for parallel spaces. And we're requiring that there be access to utilities. We're recommending that there be a freestanding platform. It's not going to be required, but we are requiring that that whatever the surfaces meet ADA requirements, which I'll talk more about in a moment. So the street surface can be just the surface of the parklet if it meets the ADA requirements. We also are recommending a modular design, so people can kind of deconstruct parts of the parklet for things like maintenance, or take it apart briefly if necessary, as well as a clear gutter space next to the curb. For the perimeter barriers, we're requiring a 36 to 42 inch wall or railing that can be higher than 42 inches as long as it's visually permeable. And then reflective tape along the edges for visibility, and then a heavy planter or other substantial barrier along the perimeter of the parklet, and a flexible bollard or delineator post at the corners, again for visibility. And then in parallel spaces, the adjacent parallel spaces will need to have wheel stops. In terms of materials, we're recommending, or the guidelines recommend, that those perimeter barriers either be made of metal, wood, or another natural material. And that if somebody wants to use some sort of alternative material, that would go through planning and zoning review. We're also highly encouraging plant materials and lighting. There are a variety of Americans with Disabilities Act requirements, ADA requirements. The first being that there be a seamless connection to the curb. That could either be through a platform that's flush with the curb or an accessible ramp. The surface has to be firm and stable with no major changes or gaps. And then there's also some specifics about accessible seating with, I won't get into all of it, but you know, certain sizes and turning areas, and then a slope that's ADA accessible as well. For fire, they are required to keep a 5 foot space around a fire hydrant. So, you know, they can't be blocking the fire hydrant with the parklet. And then canopies, roofs, and heaters are all subject to fire department approval. The main thing is that they can't be, a heater can't be within 5 feet of anything flammable, including the roof or canopy or a tree or anything like that. For maintenance, we're requiring 3 stream waste bins in the parklet. The person who is in charge of the parklet has to keep it clean and clear. They have to move the movable furniture whenever it's not in use and keep it secure. And they also have to provide access to utilities. Again, recommending the modular design, but they could do it some other way if they can think of one. And of course, it will be subject to removal for maintenance work if that's necessary. So for the fees, we have 2 different parts of the fee that we're proposing. The first is the application fee, which is just the standard $222 encroachment permit fee. And then there's an annual fee of $750 per vehicle space. We're planning to waive or reimburse those fees for the current fiscal year. And we're also hoping to have all of the installations transitioned to the new guidelines by the end of the year. Another piece of this is that we're planning to do a reduction in that $750 annual fee that's proportional to the area that's provided for the public. So area that anyone can sit in, even if they're not, you know, a guest of the restaurant, for instance. So that's, you know, similar kind of to the bus stop type parklets we have going on now that are for public use. we have the kind of standard insurance requirements that the city has for a lot of different projects, which is 1 million per occurrence, 2 million aggregate, and having the city as additional insured. That's very standard. We're also prohibiting signage on the parklet structures and kind of following along with our regular regulations around outdoor noise and alcohol and all of those types of things. For removal, we're requiring that people, that the parklet owners remove the parklet if it's not in use for more than 2 weeks. That's, of course, subject to change if they arrange with the city. We just want to make sure they're not being abandoned. And then also within 15 days from the termination of the permit or the business closing. And then, of course, if they're not maintaining the parklet properly, if they're not meeting our requirements, or if it gets in the way of maintenance work or a new project or anything like that. And we're proposing that this be a 3-year permit. And then when the 3 years are up, if we continue the parklet program, the applicants will need to reapply. So that covers all of our main guidelines that we're proposing. And we're happy to hear from you all about any comments you have about any of the guidelines, but in particular, the thing that's most relevant to the Planning and Zoning Commission is our proposals for design review. The committee members of the Economic Development Committee expressed a desire for some additional design guidance, such as like samples of what kind of materials are appropriate, pre-approved materials. And they also recommended that there be a design review process for people that wanted to pursue alternatives. So that's what we've included in this proposal that I just described to you. So the guidelines now have Planning and Zoning Commission involvement for spaces that want to use, or sorry, for parklets that want to use 3 spaces, for new materials in those walls or railing, other than the ones I described there, the wood, metal, or other natural materials. So anyone that wants to do something a little different than that. And then kind of any other design questions that might come up, things that are off the beaten path, that would be where the planning and zoning would come in and do the design review. So we're interested in your feedback on that process and design guidance, how you feel about the proposed guidelines that we have here, and also what you think your involvement in the process should be. And our recommendation is that the commission recommend the city council adopt these proposed parklet program guidelines. And with that, I'm happy to take any questions.
Thank you very much. And would members of the commission have any questions for staff at this time?
I don't think so.
Looks like we have one hand raised from Jeremiah.
We're doing a commission for now. So let's go to Commissioner McLeod for questions.
Yeah, it's just a few things I was curious about. I mean, what the 40% threshold for limiting a new business to 2 spaces. I mean, are we even close to 40% usage where we're at the moment? Or, I mean, on any given block at the moment, are we, what percentage are we using with parklets? Is it even close to that, or?
Right at the western end of Solano, there's kind of a cluster of parklets. I don't know off the top of my head exactly what the percentage is. I don't think it's at 40, but it's sort of inching towards 40, although most of the restaurants in that area already have a parklet, so it can't necessarily grow that much from where it is now.
Yeah, that's kind of what I'm thinking.
Theoretically, we could get there, but
yeah. Okay, I mean, just kind of curious how close that might be. And then I was concerned about the proposal, let's see, for the plant fill or the planters filled with heavy planter or other substantial barrier. I mean, to me, that's kind of vague. And I know almost none of the businesses currently have heavy planters. And I noticed in your comparisons that it was really only New York City that required heavy planters. You know, and I don't know what other substantial barrier would be in lieu of that. So I think that really needs some definition. And I'm trying to find it, but I thought somewhere there was a requirement for resisting a 250-pound lateral load.
Yes. So yeah, the more common barrier that we've seen is K-rails, like water-filled K-rails. And some people have also done kind of concrete barriers of various kinds. So that would probably be the more common ones you'd see. And I believe in our in the memo, we went into a little bit more detail with those barriers that they should be withstanding the 250
Yeah, and how did you come up with 250 pounds resistance?
I think the idea there, and Jeff can correct me if I'm wrong, was basically that it would stop a person from kind of bumping it over, essentially, and falling into the street or something to that effect.
Right. I think the 250 may have come from another city. I'm
okay.
on this so long, but yeah, we recognize it's not going to stop a speeding vehicle or anything like that.
Right.
It would keep a person from, tripping. Let's say a person kind of stumbles and they stumble into it. They don't go into the lane of traffic.
Okay. Yeah. Well, I'm just comparing to, let's say, a deck railing, and that requirement is 200 pounds per lineal foot resistance. So maybe that could be modified. But yeah, I think I get the idea that it's not really going to prevent a car. 250 pounds per lineal foot will not stop a car, but it is meant to prevent somebody from falling into the roadway. So that's good. Or a group of people could be leaning on it, in some scenarios. So yeah, I guess then just how we define substantial barriers, and then if there is a requirement for a certain lateral resistance, the only way I could see actually figuring that out would be to have a structural engineer analyze it. And is that a requirement for these parklets, to have a structural engineer sign off on the resistance loads, or how are we going to enforce that? Or
yeah, that was a question that came up. I think it was at the Economic Development Committee. It wouldn't be a requirement to have a structural engineer to do that. I think what we were looking for is something that we could, in our research, if it's a K-rail that's filled with water, how much water do you need to have to make it a 250 pound or whatever the threshold pound ends up being? What is that standard? And we would research that, or we would have the applicant research that, but we wouldn't ask them to spend money on a structural engineer.
Yeah, I think the whole idea is flexibility and making it work for the businesses without spending a whole lot of money or making it feasible financially for them.
Yeah, I think to some extent, if we can push it over, it's not strong enough, right?
Yeah, I was going to say, we'll find a 250 pound.
We'll run into it.
No.
Let's see, then the only other question, I guess, was kind of the fee structure. How did you determine the fee amount? Is that the $750 per year? Is that in line with other cities, or?
Do you want me to respond, Michelle? Would you?
Yeah, I can start off. The encroachment fee is just our standard one. The $750 is, in the kind of range that we've seen in other cities. But I think the exact number Jeff came up with kind of based on some calculations.
It's just kind of a rough idea of looking at what does a market rate for a restaurant space on Solano Avenue go for, and then deeply discounting it, because this isn't enclosed space. Of course, it would be essentially somewhat equivalent to a patio space that a restaurant may be able to use. So we deeply discounted that to correspond roughly to market, what we think is market rate of somewhere around $3 a square foot per month to rent a good functional restaurant space. and took roughly, I think it was like 15% of that, and then rounded that number and compared it to what other cities are doing, so that we're not tilting the playing field one way or the other. That we're in the kind of the middle range of what the marketplace, if you will, is looking for.
Yeah, I guess my last question would be like, most of the current parklets don't look like they would meet our new guidelines necessarily. So they would be required to basically rebuild or reconfigure, or
yes.
Is that true?
Yes.
Most of the parklets, yeah, generally wouldn't meet the new guidelines. The ones that very much wouldn't meet it are pretty far away. Haven't done a whole lot of building to start with, so it wouldn't be completely restructuring something that's already very much built. The ones who have done more building at this point would have less work to do to come up to the new standard. So.
Okay. All right. Thanks.
Commissioner Donaldson.
Yes, thank you. Commissioner McLeod raised a good question. I had the same one about the 40% number for the sort of maximum saturation on a given block. And I have walked and counted parking spaces and looked at it. And I can tell you by my rough calculations, I just added up some notes here. The block between Cornell and Stanage has 7 spaces occupied by parklets, and 15 spaces occupied by 7 spaces on parklets and 15 spaces free. So that comes up with a 31.8% of the total parking spaces are in parklets in that one block. And I think that's the densest block. Although the block by Kane, by Canes, would be Canes and San Pablo, has very, very few parking spaces. And actually that one parklet there might actually take up 30% of those spaces too. So just for your information, thank you. Mm-hmm.
Okay, thank you. And I see no further questions from Commission. I don't have any questions at this time. So let's go ahead and bring in public comments. So this is the chance for anyone in the public who wants to speak to this item to raise your virtual hand and be called upon. And we do have one hand raised. So staff, please bring that person in.
Jeremiah,
Good evening. Hey, Mr. Jeff Bond, if you could possibly answer my questions in an email if the commissioner doesn't want to answer me now, please. I'm actually sitting out here at Boss Burger enjoying some French fries, and I noticed that this parklet is not ADA accessible at all. There's no ADA ramp. So that brings me to my next question is, who enforces these parklets? Do we have a parklet inspector? I mean, so when is the parklet inspected? After the application process, and then the parklet's inspected to follow all the rules. Another thing is that I was actually just discussing the 3 plastic K-rails here at Boss Burger, and I had suggested that he might want to fill those with water, and then literally 2 minutes later, you start talking about K-rails filling with water. So that's great. We're on the right track. Regarding each parklet, I think they should have signs for the cars to say, approaching parklet. That way cars know there's a parklet coming for safety, so they would slow down. Especially, if one is on the corner of a street or a corner of an intersection, so there's a crosswalk right there. I'm kind of concerned about the 1 foot space on the driver's side and 2 foot space on the passenger side. Is 1 foot space really enough to open your car door to get out? I don't know. You might want to consider, bigger people that weigh over 200, 250, 300 pounds, how they can get out in and out of their vehicle. And so I noticed some plants. A lot of plants are blocking line of sight. There's that one, 5 tacos and beers, that plant on the corner actually, I had talked with them last month approximately, if they could turn it a little bit so it not block visibility. And so now it's growing weeds and it's kind of unmaintained. So we should put a clause that the plants need to be maintained and not growing weeds. And I noticed that Five Tacos and Beers right now, they have a little log, a little stump to sit on. And that thing's literally 6 inches away from the street. And I know you said you need 1 foot away from the street cars, but I don't think 1 foot away from the street is enough. What happens if because a lot of times people make a right turn a little too sharp and the back tires go up over the corner. So it's just really unsafe. So if maybe we can make that, a little bit more than 1 foot, 1 foot. So yeah, I was wondering about the permit, the 3-year permit. Could we just keep it at 1 year? That way the city gets, fees every year. And thank you.
Okay, thank you. And looks like we do not have any further speakers from the public. Last chance to make public comment on this item. Anyone? I'm not seeing any virtual hands raised, so I'll bring this back to the commission then. Who would like to go first with comments? Oh, Commissioner Donaldson.
Oh, I guess I will. I have quite a few comments, so you'll have to put up with me again. So yeah, I have done some field work and kind of looked at with the guidelines pretty carefully. And I want to start out by saying that I really like parklets. I think that the whole notion when I first saw the first one I saw in San Francisco caught my attention. And I really think that they add interest and liveliness, great ambience to the whole street scene. And when we had the first bus stop one in front of As You Wish Yoga, I personally contributed to the construction of that. I think the survey that you did in conjunction with these guidelines revealed that a strong majority of people agree with me in the level at which they favor or they like parklets and the parklet notion. But I will also say that having said that, I think that the city needs to figure out what is best for the whole business district as a whole. And I think this is a question here of decision makers balancing competing interests. And I take seriously the strong dislike comments or the dislike comments from a number of business owners along Solano, and I really do believe that that I understand where they're coming from if they aren't a restaurant business, and they may well be harmed and have their customer access harmed in some way by the construction of a lot of parklets. So I think the job of the city here is to pay close attention to this minority opinion that's been expressed to try to balance these interests. So, walking down Solano, I see 4 to 5 different types of outdoor seating areas. They're public parklets, like the one in front of As You Wish and the one in front of Souvenir Coffee, Mr. Dewey's. Those are done as bus stops. They were big investments. I think one of them was built before the pandemic and the other one was built during the pandemic and planned before the pandemic. And I think that is one kind of parklet that is different from the temporary ones that were permitted during the pandemic. And those are exclusively private restaurant parklets. In other words, we're allowing private businesses to use the public right of way. And then there are sidewalk tables in front of restaurants. They're not parklets, but we do allow them, and they're common along Solano. And I think that's a whole nother area of public seating use of the Solano right of way. And then there are tables and seats in the bulb outs, and I would consider the bulb outs that are all of them located west of Masonic as an important resource that gets used for seating in a number of places. And I think that they're not really parklets, but they should be considered, I think, in these guidelines, or that should be integrated into the guidelines in some way. And finally, there's another little use, and that's the mid-block cutout to the parking lot besides Little Star Pizza. When I was on the commission when that was approved, and my recollection is that the use permit for that says that it can't be used for restaurant seating because it's a mid-block, it's a cut through to access the parking lot. But now it is being used by Little Star as a kind of mini parklet. I'm not sure I have a big problem with that, except that I think there's a violation of their use permit there. And I think the city should be aware of that, and decisions should be made whether that's appropriate and workable or not. I know it seems like from a casual user that it's their restaurant space, their outdoor restaurant space. It no longer seems, during dinner hour anyway, like a mid-block pathway. So I've categorized all those 5 different things, and my question is, I think, or my comment is, I guess, I think that the guidelines should be broader and should pull together in a coordinated manner all the city policies relating to the use of sidewalk and street spaces adjoining our commercial establishments. The topic should be outdoor seating in the public right-of-way, which is a broader topic than just parklets. And I know, you're coming to the Planning Commission late. At the end of the process, you're ready to go to the City Council now. And I hate to throw this monkey wrench in the whole idea, but that's my concept anyway, is that we need to start with a broader picture here. I don't know what the rules are for putting tables in front of restaurants or putting tables on bulb outs. They may be a set of rules that you have and you implement already. But I think they should be in all one combined document because there's a lot of interaction between them. So anyway, that's my big overview comment. And, I'm sorry if it's not terribly helpful, but anyway, that's the way I see it. So looking at the guidelines, specific item by item, Michelle has kind of gone through them here. I'll go by this kind of following the same topics. The number of parking spaces to be taken, Ian raised it. My personal opinion is that we should limit parklet size to 2 angle parking spaces for private businesses. That would be restaurants that are going to use that public space for their own purposes. I'm not in favor of the larger 3-space parklets. I think we should limit them to 2 for that category of parklet. I like the idea of limiting the density of them. And I would go from 40% in any given block to 30% in any given block. I think as I said earlier, we're probably at 30%, over 30% now on the block between Cornell and Stanage. And I think that's as dense as we should go. And I certainly wouldn't like to see it denser anywhere else. So I'd say that's 30%, and I think that's ample, quite ample. Let's see. And then I also think that we need to look closely at restaurants that serve customers on both parklets that they have permitted and on the bulb outs. And there are a number of occasions, a number of places where that occurs. Examples, 5 Tacos and Beers they have an outdoor patio of their own. And maybe that should disqualify for them from having a parklet, I don't know. They have a parklet and they have a bulb out. My opinion is that's too many tables outdoors. And when it gets congested at that restaurant, especially during the pandemic, it was so crowded there, it jarred me compared to everywhere else on Solano walking through there on a busy day because there were so many people compacted there in the outdoor space in front of that restaurant. I think that's too much, and I think we would scale that back somewhat and look at considering bulb outs and parklets together. We might be able to come up with a little more rational guidelines for for limiting what that private business can do. So, maybe people disagree with me on that, but I do think that it can be, we can end up in a situation where we have too many tables in one little space. Okay, installation details, I'm okay with that. That part of the guidelines. The perimeter barriers, they should be inside the parking space area, and the new guidelines that Michelle talked about accomplish that. I note that some of them now go outside a little bit the parking spaces, and I hope that can be corrected with these guidelines being adopted. So I like the setbacks that you're suggesting of 2 feet on the car side, on the car door side, and 1 foot on the other, on the regular side. I think that's okay, considering that the cars aren't fully parking space width anyway. There's room for car doors there, I think. Materials. The existing parklets have a huge variety of materials, and I can understand why some Economic Development Commission would say, hey, we need to do some design review here. And I appreciate them looking at planning and zoning to do that. And so I think I support that. But more importantly, I would support not having 3-space parklets at all. And that's the trigger that you're proposing to bring it to planning and zoning for design review. Perhaps we could do something with staff level design review on the smaller parklets, and then maybe planning commission design review on parklets that are adjacent to bulb outs, or parklets that are on a street, on a block that is already congested with parklets. I would favor something like that, or perhaps the staff and the Planning and Zoning Commission could work together on some design guidelines for parklets as well. There might be several different ways you could bring the Planning Commission in to get involved here. The fire thing, I made a note here. One parklet I noticed, the Zaytoons parklet, has a metal roof and they have heaters inside, but they have wooden joists. And so I think that's a violation of this guideline, and it's something you need to think about, because most of these are going to be constructed of wood, and they'll probably have roof joists in there. Even though they have a metal roof, they're going to have flammable material close to the heaters that are inside. Maintenance requirements. I like what you have in here. I would like to see more enforcement. And I think we should require like an annual cleaning or refurbishing. And I say that based on my observations that even the nice parklet in front of As You Wish Yogurt is getting worn out already. The benches need to be restained. These are wooden materials. They get a lot of use and they don't have a long life, and they need to be maintained. And then the parklet at Barney's is just really pretty dirty, and it needs to be power washed. It needs to be cleaned. I think these facilities get a lot of use. They're out there in the weather day and night, and I think we should have an annual. These guidelines should have an annual refurbishing or cleaning requirement written in for maintenance. Fees, like Ian, I wondered about where did the 750 come from, and I appreciate Jeff's explanation of that. And then I noticed a comment letter today about looking at sort of parking meter revenue, potential parking meter revenue, as a value of the street parking space. And I thought it was a good comment. And I noticed that Vanessa's, I looked at that parklet, turns out they're in Berkeley because they have parking meters there and you got to pay for parking there. But maybe we get information on what kind of income comes to Berkeley from Solano or from those meters near Vanessa's, and get an idea as a test to see whether the $750 fee is appropriate or too high or too low. But I think that would be a real good proxy for what the value of this street space is. And I would use that in setting, I like the idea of using that in helping to set the fees. A comment on fees. I really like the idea of reduced fees for the public parklets. And it would be nice, and that'd be a real good incentive for some of the restaurants to add features to their parklet that might be public, that might be available to the public. And also this ties into the bulb outs and the restaurant use of the bulb outs, because I think the bulb outs are public space. Most of them have benches, bike racks, that kind of thing already there. I think this is where the use of bulb outs and parklets could be integrated well together. I did make a note in my reading this on the 2-week non-use limit. I think parklets aren't going to get used nearly as much in the winter, and I bet that there will be times where they won't get any use at all for 3 or 4 weeks during the cold of the winter, especially if we have a rainy season. This really works. I like the idea of discontinuing the permit if the parklet is not being in use for a certain period of time. But I think maybe 2 weeks is too short, or at least don't do any enforcement of that or during the winter time, because I think there's probably good reasons why those parklets aren't being used. So other thoughts and other issues beyond the guidelines. I think we should have a rule in here, again, integrating sidewalk seating with parklets, that there should be a 5-foot wide clear space pedestrians going down the sidewalks at all times. I know we didn't have that during the pandemic on multiple occasions at Five Tacos and Beers. I think there are other places where the sidewalks have been constrained by the parklets and at the bulb outs. And I really think that we should have a hard and fast rule of a 5-foot wide walking space where a couple or group could walk down the space and have clear sidewalk space available to the public. So, again, I talked about use of bulb outs. It's interesting looking at the Solano Junction parklet there. Is it a parklet or is it a bulb out? It's a parklet that's built on a bulb out, and it really is use of a bulb out. And so I just reiterating my thinking that the use of the bulb out should be integrated into the whole parklet plan. And some restaurants have their own patio space open to the public in the front. Five Tacos and Beer, Rendezvous, Fonda's, I think. Should those restaurants be treated differently? I'm inclined to think maybe they should. They already have outdoor seating for customers. So I'm not saying they shouldn't have parklets, but I'm not quite sure. I don't know, it raises questions for me. Oh yes, Jeremiah just called in from Boss Burger. That's a sensitive location because it's the post office. And I think we should treat it, somehow special. It really is it's a special public use area. The Bossburger Parklet takes up a short-term parking space right in front of the post office. I don't like that idea. I think that it shouldn't be allowed to do that. And I think we should declare the post office access as a special situation and be very careful what we do there. And already there's tables on the bulb out there. And I don't know, I think those tables are associated with Bossburgers. So they have tables there and they have a parklet. Is that right? Should the bulb out in front of the post office be more of a public space? There's one bench there and a bike rack. But I don't know, it just didn't seem right to me. I talked about the mid-block passage at Little Star. I've already raised that point. And then above Masonic Avenue, we get into the area that's covered by the Solano Avenue Complete Streets Plan. And I didn't review it with this in mind. I didn't review it today, but I'm pretty aware that some components of that plan are really designed to really affect the pedestrian sidewalk experience. And I think we should, I'd love it if the city would look at the portions of the Solano Complete Streets Plan that would really improve the sidewalk experience in certain locations and try to get grants to fund some of those improvements. The big, my recollection is the major modifications around chains are now around the key route, would create a lot of public space there that isn't there now. And that would be a very valuable addition to Solano. And there's no restaurants right there, but I really think that could be integrated there. And the widening of the area in front of Flowerland, where we have High Wire Coffee there, might be very beneficial as sort of to their business and to them and to access along there. So I think probably in the Solano Avenue Complete Streets Plans, there's some real opportunities for improving the ambiance and the workability of Solano, of Upper Solano, that portion of Solano, that should be reviewed at this time. So I don't know. Those are my comments. I really do like parklets, and I do think that we need to be real careful and real circumspect about the parklets run by private restaurants, and balance the benefits against the disbenefits for neighboring businesses. So I think some moderation is appropriate and necessary when looking at this program. So thank you. Mm-hmm.
Thank you. And if I could jump in and just ask some questions of staff that came up during Commissioner Donaldson's comments. How do we compare fee-wise with Berkeley? Do we know that?
Yeah, Berkeley actually does base the fees for their parklets on the potential revenue from their, sorry, I'm forgetting the word now. The parking meters. Thank you. And I believe their fee per space per year is something like $3,000. It's quite a bit more, and that's the highest that I've seen of any other city's program.
Okay.
I can add to that. They have a bond issue that is based on revenues from their parking meters, and so they were kind of compelled by the terms of their bond measure to make sure that they maintain that same level of revenue from the parking spaces.
Okay.
So sort of parking revenue bond, I presume.
Okay. Mm-hmm.
Thank you for that. And then I may have missed it, but is there something in the guidelines that does talk about maintaining a certain width of sidewalk free from obstacles? Or is that in our generally in our code somewhere?
The parklet guidelines that we've proposed here don't really get into sidewalk seating at all. So these would only be parklets that are in the parking space and
okay.
Not to go onto the sidewalk at all.
Oh, okay, got it. Fair enough. Yeah, that makes sense. And then finally, the tables outside of the post office and the tables outside of Mr. Dewey's, those are city owned, aren't they? Do you know, staff?
No, none of none of them are owned by the city. I think, I assume you're speaking, I think they're round concrete.
Concrete tables, yeah.
Those are not city owned.
Oh, interesting. Okay, because they seem to be of the same design, but well, I guess the businesses put them in. Interesting. I guess I had assumed otherwise. Okay, thank you. Did another commissioner want to make comments? Go ahead, Commissioner Waddy.
Sure, thanks for the opportunity. And I'll keep it a little bit more brief. In general, I'm a huge, no, I appreciate all of your comments, Commissioner Donaldson. I think they're a great kicking off point here. So I'm only going to opine on those things that I maybe differ on. But in general, I think the Parklet program has been wonderful. And, I'm very involved in the City of San Francisco's Parklet program in my day job. And so I'm really familiar with the premise and think it was very much a lifeline in Albany. And a lot of people who weren't familiar with Albany that I'm friends with, who maybe have come to Albany at some point during the pandemic, really, that is what they complimented. They talked about how it really brought a lot of energy and life. And again, going back to what we talk about a lot in terms of like placemaking also, it has really resulted in a sense of placemaking that didn't exist to the same degree before those parklets existed. And it's something that it's not a cookie cutter thing. And although there are some parklets that I think have executed their design better than others, there's also some character to it in the sense that I also think the market kind of dictates. The ones that are done a bit better tend to be a bit more popular. And some of the ones that are done a little less ideal, they probably see a little less revenue as a result of that. So all in all, I think it's certainly, we've had this 2-year experiment where there have been some other constraints around people's behaviors that might be different than 2 years moving forward from now. But, I know there are definitely still people who feel more comfortable eating outside than inside. And we're in, a great place, fortunately, in California to be able to do that quite a good amount of the year. And so I think it is something that we should really take the opportunity of sort of the sort of duct tape together version that we all threw together as jurisdictions when COVID first hit, be able to assess what worked and what didn't and move forward. And I really actually think it's worked quite well. I think sometimes businesses have a different perspective of the preciousness of their off-street parking than the economic benefits that some of these things have in sort of a secondary way. You go to these restaurants, but maybe you walk there. Maybe you stop by another business. Maybe you notice a business that you didn't notice before when you were driving by. I know myself, I've stopped in, and I forget the name of the boutique, but there's a shop across the street from Boss Burgers that I would have never made a special trip for, but it's always been on my way to dine somewhere where there is a parklet, where I've stopped in and where I've purchased things. And so, I do think there are these a little bit more intangible benefits to some of the businesses that maybe don't have parklets that they may not realize as business owners, where I think in these tough times, people just think about like, this is a loss. If I lose a parking spot in front of my business or down the block from my business, it's a loss to me, rather than seeing it as potentially a benefit of drawing customers to a geography that maybe they would never come to. Are we getting diners to these parklets? Predominantly, obviously, they're food and beverage businesses, but are we getting people coming to this part of the East Bay to Albany to dine who maybe otherwise have never come to Albany? And maybe they don't even know that these stores exist. And maybe they're then coming back another time and another time. And I think without some of these parklets, we lose that. And so, and I know part of this is not saying that we need to undo necessarily people's parklets who already exist there, but improve on it. But I also don't want us to forego the opportunity of the parklet that doesn't exist yet. That might be the next most amazing parklet in Albany kind of thing. And I do think the market actually helps with some of these. Again, I think the ones that are less successful, they may not want to invest the money that it takes to upgrade a little bit, or maybe that business goes under, but it gets replaced by a business who can really sort of rise to the occasion. And so with all of that, where I would rather land on this, and I sort of taken a little bit of a middle position from maybe where Commissioner Donaldson landed on this, I don't disagree that there is a point where we don't want the entire curb line dedicated to parklets. I think we do want to strike a little bit of a balance here. But I also don't want to say have a hard and fast not permitted line where, if you're over 40%, you just can't even apply, you can't ask for it. I would feel much more comfortable if across the board, we just establish a threshold, whether it's the quantity of spaces one business is seeking, or if it's in the aggregate of where this block is in terms of its total occupancy. I would rather just sort of draw a couple lines in the sand that says, if you're over these particular thresholds, you need to come to the Planning Commission for an approval. And we'll take a look at it on a case-by-case basis. There may be some instances where every business on the block is really excited about it, and no one's actually even opposed to us going over 40%. And I kind of want us to get out of our own way if the businesses fronting it are in support of it. There may be other instances where there's a lot of opposition and people have concerns, and those businesses are really sort of vehicularly accessed businesses traditionally. And that might be an instance where we want to use our discretion to say, this isn't the right block for us to go over that 40%. And so I think there are definitely going to be instances where we're going to want to hold the line and cap it per the Economic Development Commission's recommendations. But I can foresee that there may be some situations where, given the fact that part of the street frontage is, dedicated to a large curb cut, or maybe there's a loading zone, or there's an ADA space, or things of that nature, where we might just say, gosh, we're already over the 40% threshold, but doesn't this seem like a really great idea? It's a bummer we can't say yes. And so I would rather us not have anything that's a hard, not permitted kind of status, and rather draw some lines where we just say, below this threshold, they're always allowed, and over this threshold, it requires commission approval. So that's sort of my comment on the sort of the quantity issue. When it comes to the aesthetic issue, which I think is more so what you're asking for our feedback on, generally speaking, I also like just the creativity of people being able to pull together the aesthetic that kind of matches their business at some level, and everyone does it a little bit differently. My only critique, and I am trying to make sure that I'm not, applying any kind of bias here, because I do think in the world of design where we don't have these other adopted design standards per se, I think, try to sort of thread that needle here. There are some businesses that use what I kind of call like public works features, for lack of a better term, like orange cones, or, big orange safety, I don't even know what the proper term is, but the big orange round tubular things. And it feels very like we're in a state of emergency kind of vibe with those aesthetics. And I get, again, they serve a purpose. They are very bright and you notice them. And from a safety perspective, that's why they're bright. But I don't think they give that sense of permanency. And so maybe one of the recommendations, and I'm sure you can wordsmith this much better, is sort of like a discouragement of using those kinds of, more, not industrial is the wrong word, but I think you get what I'm trying to say here. So that would be one of my primary recommendations, is that be in sort of the not recommended permanent aesthetic side of the bucket. I think on the encouragement side, I would absolutely encourage the landscaping. I think there's a real nice softness when people do incorporate more landscaping. I also think just from a customer's perspective, it's much more enjoyable when you're sitting in these and there's a lot of landscaping. I think it's why actually the bus parklet in front of Hal's and the frozen yogurt shop has done very well. So there's a lot of landscaping there, and it makes it a really pleasant place to sit as like the cars and the buses are going by. It gives a really natural barrier. And you don't feel kind of like trapped and enclosed in a space. So I don't otherwise kind of want to meddle too much with the design aesthetic, but I would say those are sort of my primary two things, as sort of an encouragement for including some sort of landscaping, vegetation of sorts. And then the other would be not having those more public works type features. So with that, that's my recommendation. But all in all, I think this is an amazing program. I think it's something that also we should continue to reflect back on it. I think as we adopt these things, we should assess. We should come back and adopt policies and continue to do it. And this is a new thing for us. And so we should not just say, wipe our hands of it and say we're done. And so whether that's a sort of a 3-year, to align with this 3-year permitting, or whether we want to sort of start out having it be a little shorter so that we can, again, have a shorter period of time where we can all come back and reassess. But I do know we also need to thread the needle of, if people are putting a significant amount of financial investment into these, they kind of want to know that they've got it for a certain amount of time. So, maybe we let people get 3 years, but a year and a half in, maybe we as a city reassess the program and, see what's working and what's not once these people have made permanent their parklets, to see if we need to make any updates to the policies or the program. So with that, I will call it. Those are my comments. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner Waddy. Commissioner McLeod.
Yeah, thanks. I agree with a lot of those sentiments or ideas. I really appreciate the parklets. It's been really fun to see them on our streets. I think it really makes a much better urban experience, lively. It just looks like fun when some of the restaurants are full. It just looks like, hey, I want to stop and join the party, kind of thing. So, some have obviously been more successful than others, and that's also based on, just how successful they are as restaurants, but also sometimes it is the decor and how it is put together aesthetically. So I guess the big issues are, I wouldn't want to limit the capacity of any street, like Commissioner Waddy said. There are different numbers of parking spaces on each block, and that depends on a lot of factors. Curb cuts, like she said, or there are bus stops, all these other things that, so it's not apples to apples on every block. So we can't necessarily say, oh, it's got to be a hard and fast barrier or limit. And I think the way it's written is that 40% is just a threshold to limit the next applicant to 2 spaces max. So there's no absolute hard and fast limit, and I wouldn't really support one. And I just have a feeling that, there are only so many restaurants per block anyway, and they're not all going to necessarily apply for parklets. And, I think it's just going to be kind of naturally limiting itself to a certain number per block anyway. So I don't think we need to be overly concerned about placing limits on the numbers of spaces that can be used or parklets that can be created. And I do support, I guess it would be okay for us to look at applications that are asking for 3 spaces as a design review, but I'm a little ambivalent about that too. Let's see. So aesthetically, I like the creativity that some of the restaurants have brought. Obviously, it becomes an expression sometimes of their cuisine or their vibe, or so I do like the different aesthetic expressions. Granted, that will probably homogenize a little bit as the standards are tightened, but I think we should be allowing some creativity. As far as the barriers, I still have concerns about that guideline. Planter boxes are fine, but I wouldn't necessarily require it. And then, the substantial barrier, I think idea needs some kind of definition. And I would be happy with the same guideline as for a deck railing at 200 pounds per lineal foot. Resistance, standard all around, it's in every building code. And that does exactly what you were suggesting, preventing people from falling or failing and people falling into either the street or in a deck case off onto the ground somewhere. So I would stick with that as a guideline. I agree with the comment about sort of industrial looking. I would call them the Caltrans barriers, the sand-filled buckets, garbage cans, or I guess those are the K-rails, those kind of upside down T orange things. Those aren't particularly attractive to me. I would discourage those if possible, although they are super high visibility. But it's not very aesthetic, and I don't know. I just don't really wouldn't want to, aesthetically, I don't think that would attract many people to your dining space. Otherwise, I guess Commissioner Donaldson raised the question about bulb out seating. Is that regulated at all at the moment? Diners are free to go outside if they're carrying some takeout thing and sit there, but it's not serviced per se by wait staff or anything, correct?
So I believe Five Tacos, as an example, does provide waiter service. Strictly speaking, I don't know that we have a kind of for just the plain outdoor seating. You're gonna sit out and eat a sandwich or something at a small table and chair. Many of those don't have permits. We do have a permit available to them, but many haven't gotten that from us, and we haven't been really strict about enforcing that. But I think at least Five Tacos, I have seen waiter service at the tables in the pulled out.
And is that allowed, or is that something that should also be fee-based or something? Or it seems like that's a gray area that we could address with maybe separate regulations, or as Commissioner Donaldson suggested, be part of this package.
We've been focusing on the roadway and the parking area where the potential of vehicle conflict. I think we could accommodate this any way that the people want us to go. In my mind, it would be probably a little easier to separate the sidewalk uses from the parking space uses. Because I think in a large majority of those, there's no issue at all with a cafe. A number of our sandwich places have a table or two outside. They bring them in at night. It's just not a big deal. And I wouldn't want to have them go through the same process for design review for something like that. And it's a different safety issue as well. So I kind of think it's a separate process, but we'll roll with this any way you want.
Well, I'd be happy to treat those areas separately. And also sidewalk seating is also regulated separately. We do have a permit process for that, don't we? Or not?
No. We do an encroachment permit. That's what I was saying. We have a staff-approved encroachment permit for those. And it's a very basic thing. It says keep the sidewalk clear, some indemnities and insurance things. It's, we don't tell them what kind of table to put out.
Right. But that is a separate permit. It's already regulated. And that would, I think, be the place where the clear path of travel on the sidewalk would come into play, whereas the parklets, by definition, are not on the sidewalk.
Right.
So the parklets should not be encroaching on the sidewalk or impeding the sidewalk.
That's right.
So I'm happy to have those other sidewalk uses treated separately. I guess, I'm really just ready to support this pretty much as is, with just a little bit of tweaking to the barriers. And then, I like the idea of the annual maintenance or there's just, guidelines to keeping it clean, but it's in the restaurant's best interest to keep it maintained and clean also. So, it's, it's sort of like telling the restaurants what they will already be doing anyway if they want to keep their customers coming. So I don't know if we need to tell them to do that. But, and then I agree with Commissioner Donaldson about the 2-week non-use. That's basically if it's empty for 2 weeks or not used at all, then we would revoke the permit. Is that it? Sorry, I didn't read that section.
Yeah, it could be subject to revoking the permit or removal if it's not being used. And again, that's just more to make sure it's not being abandoned, so that we have a window of time where after 2 weeks, if we see that it's kind of clearly not being used or abandoned, then we can do something. But the idea wouldn't be to come in and smash a permit.
Right.
It's it's been raining for 2 weeks or something.
Well, could we change that to 4 weeks or something? I think that would be maybe a little more reasonable. And obviously after 4 weeks, if it's not being used, I don't know, I would suggest that. Okay, I can't really think of anything else except, inspection. One caller raised that issue. And one letter raised that issue, sort of after the fact. Do we go back and whose responsibility is it to go back and actually make sure it's not encroaching on the sidewalk or whatever, or conforming to the barriers? Is that the building inspector or?
So in all likelihood, it would be Michelle or Justin or I doing those. For most of the aspects of this, the fire department, our fire inspector will do the fire code related things. And then there continues to be county public health inspections for standard restaurant inspections. They're also looking at outdoor seating. So they're dealing with the food safety kind of side of this currently as well. So there's different sets of eyes on it, and we would have our building inspector look specifically at the construction of the components of the structure. But if it's a question of dimensions and so forth, that's probably Michelle, Justin, and I doing that.
Yeah, and then I guess the other big question would be, I mean, this is going to be an indefinite program going forward, but it could be subject to review if the city found things weren't working out in some way or another. I mean,
the plan is to review the program at the point of the permit, the 3-year permit ending, and decide whether to continue the program.
Okay, but at the same time, a new business will come along in a year or 2 years and get a 3-year permit, right? So there would have to be some, I don't know, there's some piggybacking of permits or some overlap of permits with our 3-year period that it won't conform to our 3-year period. But so we're just going to basically do a review at 3 years and then make changes, or is that the idea?
I think we'll accommodate the situation as it evolves. So if we have a restaurant, if we know we're going to do a review and let's say it's year 2 and we know we're going to do start a review in a few months and a new restaurant comes in, we would probably advise them, wait a little while, let's do our review and make sure that we can give you a 3-year permit. I wouldn't want to, we'd find the balancing act, right? I don't want to hold somebody up if we know it's going to continue pretty much as is. On the other hand, if we know it's going to change, we don't want them to put a bunch of money into something that we then don't want or
right, or have them take out or have to modify in a serious way. Okay.
Yeah, so it's just going to be a judgment call, I think, as this rolls along, and there'll hopefully not be a lot of turnover. We're trying to keep our restaurants going as much as possible, but we'll adjust it, and that's why we would bring it to you if we get to a place where we think there's a question that needs some policy guidance. That would be your role.
Okay, well, I would be happy to see this program go forward for 3 years, and then we make some adjustments or say it's all great. So, and I do agree with the kind of the spillover economic benefit of having more people downtown, more people visiting. And I noticed in the survey that more than half or no, a very big percentage come to Solano by bike or by foot. And I think these kind of places encourage our local residents to come and visit by foot and on bike and all that. So I think, it's all part of making a greener city, a more livable city, and a more vibrant city, and I'm all for it. So,
Commissioner McLeod, I can also just clarify your question about the substantial barriers. I forgot to mention that the wall or railing could also potentially play the role of the substantial barrier as well if it's constructed to be strong enough. So it could do double duty. You could have a strong wooden wall that can withstand that weight, that is doing both the railing job and the substantial barrier job.
Well, maybe the language could be, that's the primary language, that it's a substantial barrier, including planter boxes, potentially planter boxes. I mean, it's not too hard to make a railing, but you have to bolt it to something horizontal, and it's just like building a deck railing. So that's not that hard to do, but it does take a little bit of finding the right components and putting together correctly. So I mean, the idea is we have to have a substantial barrier, and that substantial barrier should resist 200 pounds per lineal foot lateral load. Right there, that's a good definition, and that's the same as a guardrail on a deck, and serves the same function. So, and I like the idea of incorporating plants too. I'm not against planter boxes per se, but right, green space is great for those kind of outdoor seating areas. I'll leave it at that. Okay, thank you.
Yeah, I'll just chime in and agree that we should reduce it from 250 to 200 if that's what the standard is for railings. That makes a lot of sense. And I can agree with Commissioner McLeod's last comments about this being a boon for the community and the city and the business area. And Commissioner Wadi spoke to this as well. You just get a good feeling with people spilling out on the, literally, spilling out on the sidewalks, and it's actually it's a very good thing. And the fact that it maybe gets a little congested at times is just, I think, just shows the liveliness and vitality that you can experience down there. And I don't, unless the sidewalk is actually blocked, I guess I'm not in favor of, if it ain't broke, let's not fix it too much, because I think it ain't broke at all. It's working very well right now. So this, as Commissioner Bond said, this is about the parklets in the parking spaces. So that's what we have before us. I think Commissioner Donaldson had some good comments about the use of sidewalk space, but I think we need to be careful there about micromanaging and spending city resources on micromanaging, the square footage of our bulb outs. If restaurants are using them well and people are very happy and benefiting from the businesses that are using them. So, there might be some more standards we need there, but we don't want to mess with success as well. So finding a middle ground there would be interesting to me. I'll also note that it's interesting if we had parking meters, like a lot of cities do. That's how they do their fees. They based it on how much parking revenue would be lost, and that's the fees they charge. So, and I think that's a great way to do it if there were parking meters, and we might have parking meters someday. I'm in favor of the idea of public use for parklet when it's not in use, that you're able to sit in the parklet. Let's see. I also agree that we shouldn't be too prescriptive about the amount of parking spaces taken up. Yeah, again, I favor not micromanaging. I'm not going to be opposed to the 40% either necessarily, but I just favor any micromanagement or anything that seems like micromanagement of that. And one thing about the K-rails is they do seem like a good, but I'm not sure why they're called K-rails, by the way. Those are the upside down like T structures, right? Yeah. And those can be painted. And I've seen in a lot of cities that parklets or businesses will use those and paint them, so they won't be the orange color, and then they'll paint them some nice color that matches whatever scheme they have going on in the parklet. So I think I think we might want to even encourage those as a standard way of providing a substantial barrier, and also put in language that, but they should be painted, or they must be painted, or maybe should be painted, so that they don't have that industrial or commercial look, or public works look, I think, as Commissioner Wadi put it. So that's about what I have, and I wanted to see if staff was clear on our direction. I think we gave a bunch of different directions, so hopefully you're let us know if there's anything that you needed more clarity on.
I think we'll go back and rewatch the tape to make sure we've got all of your comments. But I think we can, if you could take a vote to make a recommendation to the city council, I think that would be, we want to be able to convey that to them, and then we can try to catalog the comments where there was a consensus.
Okay, so the recommendation is that we review and approve the proposed project. No, I'm sorry, looking at the wrong thing. Commission approve the draft parklet program guidelines. So does someone want to make such a motion, or perhaps such a motion noting that there was commissioner feedback as well? whichever. Go ahead, Commissioner McLeod.
Well, I'll move that we approve item 7-1 Solano Avenue Outdoor Dining Parklet Program Guidelines with staff taking our comments into account and presenting it to council.
I'll second that motion.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. Is there further discussion on this item? Okay, if not, I'll ask for a vote by consensus. Is anyone voting no or abstaining on this item?
Yes, I think I'll vote no because I do think we should have guidelines that address the whole topic of outdoor seating in the public right of way. So I recognize this will move forward, and I think that's probably what the council wants, and to move it forward and the other commissions. But maybe we can urge staff that the next time around, 3 years from now, let's look at the whole thing in a bigger picture. I'd sure like to see that happen. So.
Okay, thank you.
No a lot lately. I'm a little tired of voting no, but I'm going to vote no again.
Okay, it is your privilege and prerogative.
Okay, thank you.
So that passes 3-1. So thank you, commissioners, and we will move on to the next item, 7.2, which is the design review for a new single-family home, which is not something you see all the time at 829 Santa Fe Avenue. Please go ahead, staff.
Yes, good evening, everyone. Associate Planner Christopher Tan here. Once again, I'm just going to share my screen. And once again, before you tonight is planning application 22-037, design review for a new single family home at 829 Santa Fe Avenue. Some background on the property. The subject property is a 5,000 square foot lot with a 3-bedroom, 2-bathroom, 1,687 square foot house built in 1931. City records show minor work done in the past. Here's the street view of the property as it sits today. And project request. The applicant is seeking design review approval from the commission for a new single family home. The project scope includes demolishing the existing home on site and building a new 4-bedroom, 3.5-bathroom, 2,736 square foot home with a maximum height of 26 feet. The appearance of the home is proposed to be a more modern Mediterranean look, and the project scope also includes an attached ADU on the north end of the home. Once again, a street view of the property and the proposed front elevation for the home. You'll note the single car garage at the front and a parking space on the right of that. And here is the proposed rear elevation. You'll note the balconies at the second level. And then here's the north elevation. And lastly, the south elevation. And you'll note that there are solar panels proposed on this portion of the home. The project is subject to exceptional design as indicated in the Albany Planning residential design guidelines. Some of these exceptional design treatments include the modern Mediterranean style of the home, fiberglass windows with divided lights with 3D mullions throughout the home, 3 balconies on the second story with vertical metal picket guardrails, solar panels on the roof, new landscaping, and new permeable pavers for the proposed driveway. And here's just a snapshot of the landscape plan that was provided by the applicant. You'll note the concrete paver entrance or pathway to the new front entrance, permeable pavers for the new driveway, and various drought-tolerant plantings in the front. As part of this project scope, an attached ADU is proposed on the north end of the property. The ADU is proposed to be 790 square feet in area in total and includes 1 bedroom and 1 bathroom. The ADU spans the entire north side of the property and has 3-foot setbacks, which is 2 feet shorter than what's typically required in the R1 zoning district. And this is allowed because section 2020-080 accessory dwelling units of the AMC allows greater leniencies with respect to setback requirements, side and rear setback requirements compared to what the underlying zoning dictates. Parking. There are 2 off-street parking spaces proposed for the new home. 1 space is proposed in the attached single-car garage located at the front of the home. And like I mentioned previously, the second off-street parking space is proposed adjacent to that in an open configuration on the proposed driveway, and that's on the south side of the home. Both parking spaces are compliant with R1 zoning district requirements, and they're located outside of the 15-foot setback area. No additional parking is required for the ADU pursuant to the section in the code as well. Staff has received a couple of correspondences. We received 2 letters before the hearing that were both in support of the project's overall design. We did receive 1 last-minute correspondence that we got at around 4:30 p.m. It's included and is part of the public record, but it voiced concerns with the amount of potential parking at the front yard setback area due to the proposed driveway width and the driveway apron. The project is categorically exempt from CEQA review pursuant to section 15303 of the CEQA guidelines. And staff is recommending that the Planning and Zoning Commission review and approve the proposed project subject to the findings and conditions of approval. And with that, staff is happy to answer any questions, and I see the project architect in attendance tonight. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. And did the project architect want to make any comments? Not necessary, but if you would like to go ahead and raise your hand at this time. And would you?
Yep, I see their hand.
That is the architect.
Yeah, Rebecca. Go ahead, Rebecca.
Hi, everyone. Nice to be able to present the project to you today. I just wanted to add that the current home is about 7 steps up from the sidewalk. And so when our clients approached us to design a home for them, it was with the intention that their elderly parents would have the opportunity to move in, and they wanted to create a multi-generational home environment for them to all live together. And so one of the critical aspects of this project was to create a universal design that was with a lower level that was more at grade and be wheelchair accessible and allow everyone to live together in an environment that would give the parents their own space with the ADU and be connected to the main house. So even though they currently have a 2nd-story home, the new house actually is not that much taller than what is existing. It just is increasing the square footage, and the 1st floor is lower and closer to grade to allow accessibility. And we tried to maintain the Mediterranean architectural style that is currently depicted in the original home, and kept some of those details and just enhanced them with a little bit of a more modern Mediterranean aesthetic. So just wanted to address those issues and be happy to answer any questions you might have about other aspects of the project. Thanks.
Okay, thank you for that. And do commissioners have questions at this time before we go to any public comment? Go ahead, Commissioner Waddy.
Sure, just a question for staff. By the look of the existing home, it appears to be a McGregor. Do you guys know if that's in fact the case on this one?
I don't know for sure. It's kind of hard to tell for sure if it is. So I'm sorry, I don't know.
Okay, it appears to be sort of the tile roof architectural style and split level. But okay, if you guys don't know the answer to that, that's fine. Thanks.
Thank you. Commissioner McLeod.
Quick question. It looks like there's a single wide curb cut now. So the intention is to do kind of a double wide curb cut to expand that. That's not noted on the plans, which I think it should be.
Yeah, that's a good point. Yeah, I was just going to say, I mentioned this to the applicant. Unfortunately, they were out of town when I sent the email, but they responded back that the driveway is currently 8 foot 10 inches and that the curb cut currently is 17 feet wide. So that wasn't shown on the site survey, which we requested if we could get that, but unfortunately it couldn't be prepared in time along with the site plan. But I'll let the project architect probably speak more on that too.
I mean, the existing, it's just a single wide curb cut at the moment, right? So just looking at the photograph.
Mm-hmm.
And then is there a loss of a street parking space, or I can't see the whole frontage for the property and the adjacent curb cut to the left of the house as I'm looking at the outside. I'm just curious, are we losing a street space or no impact on the street parking, or just kind of curious?
Yeah, that's something we would have to evaluate once we have those dimensions in. Alternatively, the commission could also place a special condition of approval that ensures that we don't have a loss of on-street parking space. But typically we do handle that at staff level, and we usually review that, which is one of the reasons why I pointed it out to the applicant, but it's just unfortunate we weren't able to get it.
Yeah, well, one letter did bring that up, and it didn't end up in the official list in our packet, but yeah, it just was questioning the whole idea of the double wide curb cut and kind of wider parking space area. But, you know, maybe the applicant could talk about why they're doing that. I guess it's just to maintain 2 legal spaces and.
Right. Yeah, I'll speak to that. The intention was to allow 2 cars to park side by side, since it will be a multi-generational family living there. We could probably reduce the width of that and do an analysis that would ensure that we're not removing any street parking, but still providing enough space for, you know, the 2 cars being able to park side by side off street.
Yeah, basically side by side in the, well, one is supposed to be sort of to the side of the garage, the other one in the garage, but practically speaking, it'll be in the driveway in front of the garage. So, yeah, sometimes it's possible to have one narrower curb cut and pull in and around, but I don't know. It's just sort of an idea, something to look at. Because it is kind of a big driveway area with no, I can't tell. There's some planting along the fence there to the right. Or is it all hardscape? It looks like all hardscape. All right, well, I guess we'll look at that a little more later. All right, thank you.
Okay, thank you, Commissioner McLeod. Commissioner Nicholson?
Yes, I'd like to ask the architect if I could. On the back porch, on the back side, your material choice is concrete. I thought that was a little curious. I'm wondering what your reasoning is for that. Why concrete and why not a softer landscaping material? Maybe you can talk about that, please. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, the idea there was that it would be a concrete slab with like a tile surface on top of that, just to so that wasn't clearly depicted. But yeah, it would be a material that would allow that indoor outdoor kind of California living flow from the main house to the rear yard. So definitely want to keep it warm and user-friendly. So the concrete would just be the base below the tile. We can clarify that with the final submittal.
Thank you. That's helpful. Thank you. Mm-hmm. That's all I have.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, thank you. Were there further questions from the commissioners? I don't have any, so let's go ahead and go to any public comment we might have. This is the time for any anyone in attendance to raise their virtual hand if they want to comment on this project. So please, staff, let in the first commenter.
Okay, first speaker is Jeremiah. Jeremiah, go ahead and speak.
Good evening. This is Jeremiah. So I was wondering, is this the first reading of this project? Because usually the architect usually gives a really good presentation with slides and for everybody to see. So this, I don't know, this may just be the first reading. Also, let's see here. I was kind of concerned of the setbacks to 3 feet just for the fire department. You know, but I guess if it's some sort of rule that's already in place to where 3 feet is okay, I think that's okay. Let's see here. So, oh yeah, in other words, it's a multi-family home, multi-generational. And so it was mentioned that the owners, I guess the parents, are going to be sleeping in an ADU. That sounds pretty interesting. Does an ADU have a separate meter for electricity or water? I was just kind of curious how this ADU is going to go, so far as, you know, PG&E bill, let's say, or East Bay Mud. Does an ADU require a separate meter? I mean, it's the same family or something, so they may work out the electricity bill or the utility bills, whatever it is. You know, ADU is 1/3 of the primary residence. I don't know how that's going to work out. But also, was this a complete demolish, or were they just going to leave up one wall and kind of just build, you know, do an addition? Because I'm familiar with people trying to just demolish a house completely and just leaving one wall up so they can technically get around certain rules or whatever. So I guess it was mentioned as a complete demolished, so they're not going to leave up one wall. I'm looking forward to possibly another presentation for the design review, or, you know, aesthetics, or, you know, that way the commission gets to help make some comments on, you know, what color paint they should use on the outside of the building, or, you know, what color roof tiles, you know, gray or, you know, terracotta, or all that kind of stuff. Those are really fun. So I'm looking forward to a second reading. But so far the project looks great. They're making a good use. Oh, and also, last thing, I know I only have 2 seconds, but isn't there like an open space, like certain amount of feet required for open space yardage compared to square footage of the home?
Thank you for your comments. And I don't see another hand up for public comment, so we'll go ahead and bring it back to the commission at this time. Would any commissioners have further comments? Commissioner Waddy.
Sure, I'm happy to start out. So I do in general have some concerns actually about this project from an architectural design review, and to sort of chirp Pilch's original comment, we don't often see full outright demolition new construction projects. We often will see, or have most recently seen, you know, second story additions or some rear additions. And in those cases, particularly for projects that have been modifying McGregor homes, we typically see the retention of a McGregor architectural style, at least to some degree, and sort of a setback addition. For me, I really do have a bit of a concern about us losing McGregor homes, and I'm pretty confident this is one. Certainly, if the architect has information that indicates this is not one, that is impactful information for me if they're able to demonstrate that. But from my experience, this does appear to be one in my sort of architectural knowledge here of that housing typology. To me, those are significant architectural resources in Albany, are the McGregor homes. And our design guidelines specifically call out McGregor homes literally on the front page as a significant architectural typology in Albany. And this home does retain, I think, a lot of those architectural character. Now, on the flip side, I'm very, very supportive of people modifying their homes, updating them. You know, homes built in the 20s, 30s, and 40s do not meet modern living needs. And I think people have a right to really do what they need on the inside of their homes and do expansions that accommodate needs. I'm also really sensitive to universal design and being able to adapt homes for sort of folks who need accommodation and can't walk up the stairs. And I think there are ways to do that. I'm just having a bit of a hard time making the leap on this one for an outright demolition. And I do have some concerns, just generally speaking, about the architectural quality of the proposal. So I'll go into some specifics to try to give some constructive feedback on this. And again, I am not opposed to making major alterations to this building to accommodate the family's needs. I just don't feel like we've quite hit the mark on this one. So I would not be ready to support this project tonight. Going into the specific details, first and foremost, massing and scale. The massing and scale of this home do appear to be really out of context with the neighbors. I know it is on a significantly wider lot than many of the homes probably on this block. But when you look at it in that sort of broader context, there is still, regardless of lot width, there's a bit of a cadence of sort of the primary width of the primary facade of most of the homes on the lot. There's sort of this general envelope that a lot of these buildings fall into. And where there are wider lots, there tends to be an adjustment or sort of a change in wall plane to provide that relief and contextuality for those narrower lots that are maybe just smaller homes. Similarly, that is a principle in our design guidelines that really talk about, providing these variation in wall plane depths and projections when projects are seeking an exceptional design approval from us. So right now, as proposed, it just feels like a very solid, flat, wide building that appears very tall. And I think with the roof form as well, it adds extra sort of height and bulk. I actually think if that roof form was not there, the height would be very much in keeping. I do think there still, though, needs to be some play sort of on that within the horizontal plane to break up the horizontal width of the building. I'm a little bit concerned that it feels the architectural style feels a bit sort of faux Mediterranean. It's feeling, and I was contemplating whether to even say this or not, but I do get a bit of a feeling of this very like suburban cul-de-sac-y architecture, which is just not something we typically see in Albany. I think a lot of the homes that we see are either people doing very contemporary, 2022 contemporary architecture with contemporary materiality that respects, proportion and scale of adjacent buildings, or they're taking their existing architectural style and truly carrying that through. So it feels like it's, an addition, but a 1920s house or a, craftsman style home or a McGregor style home that's just been added onto. I feel like we usually either see one of those two buckets. And this feels a little neither here nor there in terms of the proposed architectural style. So I do just generally have some concerns about that and sort of the arch windows, and not in sort of a Palladian window style, but just sort of like the arched suburban home style that's tacked on to a larger, a lower casement, rectangular window typology. I also have, some small critiques on the windows. It called them out as true divided lights. The window section does not appear to indicate that these are true divided lights. It looks like it's simulated, tacked on the interior and exterior without a spacer bar in the middle. So to me, unless it is a true divided light where there's one pane of glass which no one builds anymore, it's the simulated divided light. And I believe the direction we usually provide is for there to be that spacer bar so that it really has that true divided light look and feel to it. Two remaining points on the driveway. I do have concerns about sort of the shifting location of the driveway. I think right now where it's located, it feels like it's probably about a 10-foot wide driveway, which to me is sort of all that is necessary to access a garage and off-street parking, but also it's stacked to the farthest, I guess that would be southern side of the property line, and it's stacked, and the adjacent property to the south, theirs is stacked to the north. So the two driveways together are really aggregated to minimize the loss of any on-street parking. And we have a lot of discussions on this commission about off-street parking and impacts on on-street parking. And I'm certainly supportive of when people want to provide off-street parking as well as when they want to remove it. But I feel like if you're going to provide your off-street parking, there's also a responsibility to do it in the most efficient way possible. And I think the way that it's pulled off of the southern property line and expands it so that somebody can sort of park one space effectively uncovered and then one in the garage, it really is at the sacrifice of on-street parking. And I'd really like to see that minimized. I would certainly be supportive in only, one off-street parking spot being provided if that's all that can be accommodated in the garage, if you're trying to use that other square footage. But my feeling is also if there is a new construction proposal before us, then at some level, either provide one off-street parking space and minimize impacts to the public, or accommodate your parking needs in an enclosed space. I don't really think it's appropriate to provide uncovered off-street parking in a new construction situation where you don't have inherent physical constraints of the built form. A lot of our buildings do have a lot of constraints because they're old buildings and there's, you're working with what's existing, but when you're clearing the lot and you're starting fresh, I think you should either provide one space and say, that's all we need, or provide the proper covered spaces of 2 spaces and reserve that on-street parking. Lastly, my comment about landscaping. I don't really have any critique of the front setback landscaping other than I think there's too much hardscape for where the parking situation is being accommodated right now. But at the rear, I do feel, again, for projects seeking exceptional design, although I think absolutely there's a need for the sort of indoor outdoor living, patio and a hardscape surface to accommodate outdoor dining and sitting and those sorts of things. There's also an expectation that there is a level of landscaping in the backyard. And right now the proposal includes no landscaping in the backyard. And I don't know if that's an oversight in the materials that were provided to us, but there is an expectation, I think, from us that projects seeking exceptional design will have a comprehensive full site landscape plan, which right now we don't have before us. So those are my initial comments. Again, I don't normally come out quite this opposed to initial designs. And again, I'm very supportive of accommodating multi-generational living and universal design, and would be very supportive of having the applicant come back with alternatives. But I would encourage actually looking at ways to, work within the existing building envelope, even if the, existing floors need to be dropped to grade, even if an elevator has to be introduced, like whatever the means are of being able to accommodate, I would encourage looking at retaining some of the existing architectural character, at least of maybe the first, 15 or 20 feet of the building. Or if it is going to be an outright demolition, having a building that's better than a McGregor, architecturally speaking. And to me right now, the replacement building is not superior to the existing architecture. So that's where I'll leave my comments. Thank you.
Oh, sorry, I was double muted. Thank you, Commissioner Waddy. Commissioner Donaldson?
Yes. I'm contemplating Commissioner Waddy's comments here. My first reaction to this design was that it looked very massive, and a quick calculation to me shows that the real physical FAR is going to be 0.7 because the ADU has been excluded from the FAR calculations. And so we have a maximum FAR building of 0.55 plus the ADU, which brings it up to 0.7. And so it really is going to be one of the largest building single-family homes in Albany in terms of FAR. And it looks that way. And that my thinking initially was, well, there's nothing we can do about that because the state has said the ADUs are exempt and we can't consider it. I think I'm bothered by that because here in this design, the presence of the ADU is very visible and creates a very massive looking building. I have to admit that I didn't look closely at the existing building. I just looked and said, oh, it's going to come down. And I didn't look at it. I don't know if it's a McGregor or not. But I think Commissioner Waddy's point is very well taken, that if it is a McGregor, the new design needs to be at least as nice as the McGregor's would be, and appropriate for Albany. My reaction is there are a lot of things that I liked about the design. I thought that they look very stylish and kind of high class in a way. The garage door design, the railings, the quality looked like high quality. The windows to me look like pretty high quality. I was concerned about the limited amount of landscaping in the front and the backyard, especially the backyard, as Commissioner Waddy noted. I hadn't come prepared to say we should ask for a different design or a modified design, but I sure would love to see a building that did not have such a massive presence on the street front, and this one does, and it really will be quite out of scale with the other homes along Santa Fe in this block and adjoining blocks. And so I wish I could be more productive and provide better guidance in my comments about where to go from here. But my only thing is perhaps you can put an ADU in there, but I think that the front profile of the house is too large, and there might be a way to reduce that and basically redesign it so that more of that ADU space is in the back, and away from the street view. The parking in the driveway, I initially wasn't especially bothered by it because I noticed that it had pavers in there, which I consider a very high quality driveway material, and they looked okay to me. But we did have a comment from Ken McCrowski, a neighbor, suggesting that that driveway curb cut be narrowed down. And perhaps Commissioner Waddy's comments about let's look and see if we can have one off-street parking space and add one on-street parking space with a narrower curb cut. I would be in favor of doing that if it means that the amount of landscaping on the front yard can be increased. I would support that. I think maybe I'm now convinced that we should ask the developer to take a look at some design modifications. So, okay. Mm-hmm.
Okay, thank you, Commissioner. Commissioner McLeod, did you have some comments?
Yeah. Yes, one, I agree with a lot of what's been said. I at the same time, if the old house is going to be demolished, I'm fine with that. And just because of what was there before doesn't mean you necessarily have to match it going forward. It's a clean slate, so it doesn't, I don't think they should actually be held to design to what was there. Stylistically, the old facade, the old front part of that house had some nice elements, kind of McGregor-like, if not a McGregor. But, I don't think we should be forcing anybody to match the style that was there in a new house. It's their prerogative to change it, and I'm okay with that. But having said that, I do agree with Commissioner Waddy's kind of overall critique of the new design. It does seem kind of generic in some ways, especially the side views. The front, I think could be better. It's got some good elements. The wood garage door, the railings are helpful, but it is kind of a very wide front presence. It helps to have the little bit of an indent for the porch, but you know, as a standalone design feature, it doesn't seem that attractive, just the flat top to it. Maybe there would be some way to break up the massing in the front a little bit more. Trying to look at the elevation again. Let's see. You know, I guess we are not legally allowed to comment on the ADU at all, or even, I suppose, its placement on the lot. I would assume that the design changes that we could request would be simply the rest of the house around that ADU portion, but you know, there could be a design solution that moves the ADU. You know, and I guess the other thing, just looking at the back end of the house, it looks kind of, or the side views, it just looks kind of truncated with the hip roof in the front and the gable roof in the back. But you know, I see the value in putting the solar panels there, so that's okay to have a bigger south-facing slope. Yeah, I think maybe just a little more modulation in the front would be helpful. And I'm a little concerned about the driveway as well. I get the idea would probably be that the two cars would park side by side in the front portion of the driveway, maybe. And I just looked at Google Maps, and it looks like the street parking area is about 2.5 spaces. So there's no real loss of street parking if the curb cut is wider, but the curb cut could still be narrowed a bit and still provide access to the spaces for the cars. So I'm not really sure, you know, where to go on this one, but you know, I think it could be improved a bit, for sure. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. I'll chime in with my comments at this time. If I can find them, here we go. I think Commissioner Wadi's comments are good, although I agree with Commissioner McLeod that that it's not, that we, you know, there's some question about whether it's not, we haven't spotted that it's a McGregor. No one knows for sure. No one can say, oh, that's definitely a McGregor. And even so, I don't think that all, you know, we have to preserve those buildings, although I do like reuse. I favor reuse, but in some cases you can't get what you want. But I appreciate Commissioner Wadi's comments on the design. It is kind of one big block. There is articulation in the front, but the most of the house is a big square. Once again, this would be since the new. I was hoping we had. So we don't have any all-electric construction requirements yet in Albany, even for new construction, correct, staff?
That's correct.
Yeah, that's unfortunate because we could require all-electric here, and so once again, I'll, you know, you would, if this is going to come back to us, you would please at least two commissioners greatly if you made this an all-electric, and it's not. I'm not certain that it is all electric. Commissioner McLeod, did you want to?
Yeah, they have a note on the title page that it will be all electric. So
okay.
It's good. Yeah, that's great. Terrific.
But I sure would love, but I am more and more inclined to want that for significant remodels as well as new construction that would require all electric. But anyway, getting back to this particular project, yeah, I would be okay with referring it back to the applicant for potential redesign and continuing this. It is quite a significant project, so I think it's worth the architects and the applicants thinking a bit more about it. Certainly, it needs some landscaping in the back as well. I agree with that. Oh, and one last thing that I wanted to mention, and I'm going to mention it in the next project too, is that where the main residence abuts the ADU, I think you should be very careful about the two uses on either side. Here, I'll note that there's a TV right next to the bedroom of the ADU. So the living room TV is mounted right on the wall, which is the shared wall of the bedroom of the ADU. Personally, I would be an unhappy ADU resident if that were the case. Much rather see a seldom used area on the other side of my ADU bedroom. Not sure there's much that can be done there, but just something to note. And so, yeah, I look to my other commissioners at this time for further comment or a motion. Commissioner Waddy.
Sure. I mean, I would be happy to make a motion to continue the project to a date uncertain to enable the project sponsor to continue on either making amendments to the project to have this be an alteration, leveraging existing architecture, or to redesign the project based on the feedback received today.
Okay, thank you. Commissioner Donaldson, you have your hand up. Were you going to second, or you're muted? Oh, you're muted, Commissioner Donaldson.
I'm sorry. Yes, I'll second the motion. And Mr. Chair, I'll also suggest that it would be wise, since we're asking for a continuance, that we give the applicant the most detailed guidance we can looking forward. Commissioner Waddy's made some good comments. I'll add from my own point of view, what I would like to see would be a less massive front of the building, more setbacks, more side setbacks, and perhaps some more articulation in the front, and maybe even a smaller size in the new dwelling unit. I think the ADU at 790 feet is probably very fine, but the main dwelling unit is pretty large, and when you add the two together, you really come up with a very massive development, and that's my biggest concern here. So, okay, I don't know if I have any other comments that I can make that'd be helpful, but maybe other commissioners do. Mm-hmm. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. We do have an emotion and a second and a good suggestion from Commissioner Donaldson to give further detailed feedback for the applicant. Commissioner McLeod.
Yeah, I would suggest working on the front facade a bit. I think the ADU front window could be bigger. I find the arched porch a little incongruous with the arched window above with the gable on top of that. And I just find like the fascia board looks kind of too big to me, a little heavy, could be a little smaller, but maybe just some more attempt at articulation in the front and maybe changing that front porch. The sides of the building look very generic to me. I don't know, there's really no relief there at all. And it's just, the truncation in the back looks a little funny to me, but it's not something that's really terribly visible from the street or anything. And then I would also support maybe a sort of more thoroughly developed landscape plan, and then somehow maybe more planting on the right edge of the driveway would be helpful, something besides just, little 12-inch shrubs or something, but and I would narrow the curb cut. So, that's it for me.
Okay.
Okay, thank you. And I'll just add that I'm looking at the plans for the existing residence, and it does take up quite a bit of the width of the lot, just as the new proposal does. So I think it is maybe worth thinking whether or not the existing structure could be reused, and the areas where there are just a first floor, a second floor be added, and perhaps the right-hand side, the southern side could become the ADU. Something to consider if you are going to consider retaining the existing building, which I definitely would support if it's possible. And Commissioner McLeod.
Well, just one last comment. I mean, it's not a historically protected house. I mean, basically, we have nothing historically protected in Albany, so nobody's required to reuse it or rebuild the same style or anything like that. So, the back of the existing house is incredibly boxy when you look at it in Google Maps. So, I mean, there's in the back, it's like it's some sort of big addition in the back, or something's been changed over time. I mean, there's some nice elements in the front that are kind of McGregor-like I said, but again, nobody is forced to rebuild a new house in the same style as the old one. I can't support that idea that, and we can't tell them they can't tear down the house. They're 100% within their rights to do that.
Yeah, I think that's a good point. I thank you for mentioning that the back is boxy. I did wonder if this building had an unpermitted additions to it at some time. Seems like that might be the case. Commissioner Waddy?
Sure, just two really quick points, and then I think we do have a motion in a second, so we can move on to the next item. But I just want to be clear for the record, I wasn't insinuating that anyone should be rebuilding sort of a faux McGregor in the new construction. To me, it's two distinct options. You either work with what you have and sort of remodel an existing architectural style, or build something that's contemporary and of its time. So to me, there is a really big distinction. The other thing I'll just note is this project is subject to CEQA, and under CEQA, one of the principles of CEQA is about historic resources, and it's not just about things that are actually locally listed, but it is things that are eligible to be listed on the California Register. I would argue that the McGregor homes that are in good condition, which this one does appear to be, going back in Google Street View, would very much be eligible, in my professional opinion, at least, to be listed on the California Register. So the standard is sort of the quality to be eligible for listing. It doesn't actually have to be locally listed under CEQA to be considered a historic resource. So I know Albany does not really do that in our day-to-day reviews, but I do just want to point out that is actually the legal standard that is in order for us to have a CEQA exemption be granted. So I just wanted to put that out there. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. And thank you for noting that we probably should move on. I do see it has gotten later than I thought. So very good comment. We do have a motion and a second. Are there any last comments before we call for the vote? And the vote was to continue to, the motion rather was to continue to the date uncertain. So I will just ask if there's any opposition or abstention to that motion. And seeing none, and none for me, then we all vote yes to continue to, unanimous vote yes for to continue to a date uncertain. And thank you everyone for being here tonight. We will move on then to the next item on the agenda, which is design review and parking exception for a single-story rear addition at 1146 Evelyn Avenue. And take it away, staff, when you're ready.
Sorry, one moment. Can you hear me? Okay.
Yeah.
Right. I thought it was muted. Okay, good evening. Once again, this is planning application 22-038, design review and parking exception for for a single-story rear addition at 1146 Evelyn Avenue. Some background on the property. The subject property is a 6,357 square foot lot with a 2-bedroom, 1-bathroom 896 square foot home built in 1950. The subject property is located in the R1 zoning district with the watercourse overlay. City records show the following work done to the property. And notably, back in 2019, July of 2019, the Planning and Zoning Commission approved a design review request and conditional use permit and parking exception for a 2-level addition at this same property. The project scope at that time also included an attached accessory dwelling unit. However, that under that design, it was located on the proposed second story of the home. However, construction was never pursued and the project was abandoned, and the previous property owners sold the property to the current owners back in 2020. Here's the street view of the property as it sits today. And project requests. Before you tonight, the applicant is seeking 2 entitlements: a design review approval for a ground level conversion and single-story addition, and a parking exception to potentially allow parking in the front yard setback area. Here's the existing front elevation of the home. You'll notice the garage at the front facade. And here's the proposed elevation. Interior programming. Ground level. The applicant is proposing to eliminate the existing garage and convert the ground level into additional habitable and conditioned space for the primary dwelling. The ground level of the home is proposed to accommodate an office/bedroom, 1 bathroom, kitchen, dining areas, and a storage room. The applicant is also proposing a single-story addition off the rear of the home, approximately at 308 square feet in area that would accommodate a new living room for the primary dwelling. For the second level, the applicant is proposing remodeling and reprogramming the spaces to allow 2 bedrooms, 1 bathroom, a family room, and a family room with a wet bar. This project is also proposing an attached accessory dwelling unit. The applicant is proposing a 767 square foot attached accessory dwelling unit located at the rear of the property and attached to the proposed single-story addition. The ADU is proposed to accommodate 1 bedroom and 1 bathroom, along with kitchen, dining, and living areas. The ADU is proposed to match the architectural style of the primary dwelling and will have a maximum height of 13 feet 5 inches to match the first level of the primary dwelling. And once again, pursuant to section 2020-080 of the AMC, this portion, the ADU portion of the project, is exempt from Planning and Zoning Commission review. The applicant was kind enough to provide some 3D renderings. Here's the proposed front facade. You'll note permeable pavers are proposed in this region right here at the front. And here's another view of the property. The applicant is proposing a tandem parking space here to the left of the front facade. Here's that creek-facing facade side elevation. Again, from another angle, you'll note the deck right here, the lower right-hand corner of the screen, and then the other side of the building. Once again, this project is located in the R1 zoning district with the watercourse overlay. Section 2024-08030 G1 of the zoning code requires that such structures shall not be located within 20 feet from the top of the natural creek bank. Additionally, section 2024-030 G3 and section 2052-060 require that all new construction of structures on the subject property have its lowest floor of the building 3 feet above the highest adjacent grade. Just a side note that the code does stipulate that references be made to the flood insurance rate map from FEMA to derive these elevations. The applicant has consciously designed the proposed home to comply both the aforementioned regulations. And to address that, with respect to the creek setback, you'll see this is the proposed site plan that the architect provided, and all portions of the building are designed to be outside of that creek setback area. And with the latter code regulation I cited, the finished floor rate, the lowest floor of the home is proposed to be 3 feet above highest adjacent grade throughout to comply with it. So both those code sections appear to be complied with based on the proposed design. The applicant is also seeking a parking exception. There are currently 2 off-street parking spaces for the home. One is in the attached garage. The other is in a parking pad to the south of the property and can be accessed via a separate driveway apron. The applicant is proposing to eliminate the existing attached garage space and relocate the parking elsewhere on site. That parking is proposed to be relocated to the southern parking pad that's existing, but it's proposed to be extended to accommodate 2 off-street parking spaces in a tandem configuration. With that, the applicant is seeking a parking exception approval from the commission to allow parking in the front setback area. Findings for the parking exception were included as part of the staff report. Just a few notes on the northern driveway apron. Staff is this was mentioned also in the staff report, but staff is seeking specific feedback from the commission regarding the northern driveway apron. As mentioned also kind of previously with the previous project, when parking is removed as part of the project scope and the associated driveway apron is typically required to be restored to sidewalk if it does not provide access to a compliant off-street parking space. The northern driveway measures just shy of 16 feet in length, which is the minimum length required for front yard parking pursuant to section 2028-040 of the zoning code. And so the main question for the commission is, should the northern driveway apron remain or should it be restored to sidewalk? And a few notes on the southern driveway apron. A lot of this was mentioned with the previous project too, so some of the commissioners may be familiar with this, but the driveway apron on the southern off-street parking space or parking pad is located technically within the city of Berkeley. There are no property records that indicate that city of Albany permitted this curb cut. Thus, it's possible that the Berkeley authorized the curb cut for the property as a portion of the street frontage is in their jurisdiction. The proposed off-street parking space could be adjusted right now as it's shown on the site plan. It encroaches into the city of Berkeley territory by a little bit. But in speaking with the architect and just based on what we can see visually on the plans, it could be adjusted to be contained entirely within Albany property. Since the curb cut is an existing condition that's part of the property, it acts as a prescriptive easement with respect to access. If the commission felt strongly, a condition of approval could be included requiring the property owners record an access easement for the driveway pad. This was also a possible suggestion for the previous project that was proposed here in 2019. Alternatively, the commission could approve the parking as proposed with no associated special conditions of approval. And then just to show that visually, this is the southern parking pad that's proposed, 2 tandem parking spaces, and a portion of this front parking space, as you can see, exceeds the subject property lines. But I think based on what we're seeing, that it could be pushed further deeper into the lot to accommodate. Correspondences. Staff has received 1 correspondence voicing concerns with the existing deck and the proposed addition to the home and the potential complications with potential flooding on the property. The project is categorically exempt from SECRO review pursuant to section 15303. And with that, staff recommends that the Planning and Zoning Commission review and approve the proposed projects subject to the findings and conditions of approval. And with that, that concludes my presentation. I know the project architect is in attendance this evening, and so we're both happy to answer any questions. Thank you.
Okay, does the project architect wish to say anything at this time, or if so, raise your virtual hand. Otherwise, we might just call on you later. I see Mauricio has raised their hand.
Hi, good evening, everyone.
Mauricio. Good evening.
Hi, well, thanks for reviewing our project tonight. I think the important key aspects that I think we would like to bring forward, as Christopher has very detailed explained the proposed scope of work, is that we are making a very strong effort to keep a lot of the existing features in place. I mean, this is a substantial transformation of the existing house, but it's still technically a remodel project. As the second floor is going to be maintained, both the structure and some of the interior configurations, including a bathroom that was remodeled in the recent past years. The existing lower level of the house, it's currently totally unconditioned. And as you well know, and Christopher pointed out, we're dealing with the FEMA flood zone here. So we're going to have to raise these floors. So that's a slab on grade right now. So obviously the first floor, which will be the main level, will need to be reconstructed, you know, to meet those criterias. And but the house will be raised as it's standing today. So the upper floor will be remodeled, new foundation will be built, and the main floor will be reconstructed under that. Regarding the parking, I know this is a unique situation we would like to bring to your consideration. I mean, here we have both of these curb cuts are existent. And obviously, we are giving up the garage right now to create this off-street parking and the front setback. I think that the northern curb cut is something of our interest and definitely to the client's interest to be maintained. As they don't have a garage right now, I mean, this could also be used as potentially a charging station for an electric car, or even for a weekend project where this will be very close to their storage unit, and you know the owners could work on their car or could do other outdoor projects in the area. That also, although it's just quite, you know, not quite meeting the minimum requirements for outdoor parking, I think it's just shy of 16 feet in length. You know, we think that that could be beneficial for the ADU. You know, I think that could be used in the future. I know some, you know, people are using smaller cars these days, smart cars that can easily fit on that space. And I think it'll be, you know, actually beneficial to keep the parking off the street, because as we're adding the ADU in the back, you know, one could argue that we're increasing on-street parking. So our desire and idea for this proposed design is to keep the northern curb cut as well. I think that summarizes it. And if you have any other questions, I'm happy to answer.
Thank you. I'm going to jump in first with a couple of questions for staff. One is, what would be, why would we want to ask that the southern pad be not encroach upon Berkeley?
I mean, I believe the previous commission sentiment was that just for being cookie cutter, strict application of zoning code, that all off-street parking be located entirely within the subject property lines. So that was just some of the fear with that and possible liability, who knows. But ultimately they didn't adopt that special condition of approval. It was a suggestion. Okay. And then you mentioned a couple other things that could be done with regard to that pad and or maybe the curb cut. And can I ask you, what would be the advantage of asking for, I think we could ask for a special permit, or there are a couple of things that we could do, and why would we do those things? Are you speaking about the northern driveway apron? No, still the southern. Oh, nothing, just that an access easement could technically be recorded by the property owners if the commission felt that was needed or warranted. Okay. But staff doesn't recommend either way then? No, not. Okay. Yeah, it's indifferent. Okay. Because it's an existing condition too. Okay. And then for the northern pad, you mentioned it could be restored to the curb. I don't know exactly what that means. Do you mean that the curb cut could be removed
and well, I guess it could remain a pad or it could become landscaping. Is that what you mean by restored to the curb?
Yes. So the curb cut could be restored to just be sidewalk once again, and could potentially provide greater on-street parking. We would need to do a greater analysis about sidewalk lengths there. So that is one option, or it could remain as is. And if the commission felt that having the amount of parking spaces that the applicant's proposing is in the best interest for the property owners and the city.
Okay. All right. I have some comments about that, and I'll save those for a minute. Who's next with questions? Anyone? Any commissioner have questions at this time? Commissioner McLeod.
Going back to our watercourse overlay, it refers to the building, not the house or the building not being built in that 20-foot creek setback. What about driveways and things like that, or retaining walls, or?
Yeah, that's a good point. There's no mention of flat work such as driveways with respect to the creek setback areas. Additionally, for setbacks in general, there are allowed encroachments of certain architectural features, such as porches, balconies, decks, access stairs, things of that nature. Those are allowed to encroach into side setback areas or certain setback areas, but nothing specifically regarding the creek setback.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And the deck apparently was rebuilt. I guess that was not done with a permit, because that wasn't listed in the permitted work that had been done in your staff report?
I think it was originally built without permits, and then they retroactively received one, if I recall correctly. And Jeff can refresh me on confirm that, but we might not have had the permit on file or in our records, or it was being digitized, so we might have had it sent out, so it might have not shown up there. But it was originally not done without permit, and then they retroactively got it and got approval.
There was, I'm not remembering the details either, but there was discussion with the applicant about that, and that was a couple of years ago. I'm sorry, I'm not remembering the details. I'll try to search for that real quick.
And I guess, are decks permitted in that creek setback zone? We had a project recently, not too long ago, where there was some sort of deck that had its supports in that zone, and we wanted them to take that out, I think, or we made them take that out, or.
I believe that project was 1145 Evelyn, which actually is the same architect here before us tonight who designed. The deck wasn't required to be removed under that.
No, I thought we would. No, or we were pulling the supports back or something to cantilever it more, or no? Okay. All right. Okay. Yeah, that's it for now.
Okay. Last chance for questions from the commission before we go to the public. Seeing none, let's see if there's any public comment. This is your chance, members of the public, to comment on the project. Please raise your virtual hand if you would like to comment. So staff, please let the commenters in.
Sure. First speaker, Lisa, you have 3 minutes to speak starting now.
You will need to unmute. There should be it. There we go.
Okay, sorry about that. I'm just trying to clarify something. The description that was read initially mentioned that the ADU had 1 bedroom and 1 bathroom. Is that correct?
We,
Doesn't
we,
match what I saw
we'll come.
earlier.
We'll come. We don't typically engage in a back and forth during public comment, but we'll note your question.
Sure.
Answer it when we done.
Okay, that was it.
Thank you. Next speaker.
Should I start? Okay.
Yes.
Yeah, I'm the person that lives south of the property, Louis Snitz, and I believe my fellow neighbor is correct that the ADU is significantly different, 2-bedroom, 2-bath, not 2-bedroom, 1-bath. And I'm a little concerned on the southern driveway. I do relinquish some property, which is basically useless to me, but I don't want to relinquish more. I have fruit trees there, and I'm not quite sure the extent of the width expansion there. I just can't tell. By the way, I was also a observer of the wood deck, and I do believe that wood deck got significantly deeper towards my house. And the owners didn't seem to agree with me. So I'll be facing many, many, many windows where I currently face a very nice open space. So I don't know what kind of, if there's anything a neighbor can ask with regards to curtains and privacy. And, you know, landscaping if possible. And another question I have is how long is the project? Is it more than 1 year?
Okay. I found this on the web for is it more than 1 year?
Oh.
Jesus. I'm done. I'll unmute myself. I'll mute myself.
Okay. Yeah, it seemed like your phone was trying to answer for you. Very good. Well, thank you for the questions. Typically, I don't believe, well, staff can answer about the length. I'm not sure that we can speak to the length of the duration of the project at all. But can staff clarify that the description is different than the actual project in terms of the ADU?
Yeah, that's a mistake, unfortunately, on my part. When I first originally looked at the project, it looked like maybe one of the bedrooms was connected to the primary dwelling, but in looking at the area diagrams, the ADU is proposed to have two bedrooms and two bathrooms. And you can see that pretty clearly on sheet A 1.2. Yeah,
exactly. Thank you. Okay. Thank you for that clarification. And as long as I've got the floor, I would like to ask staff, do we have any, is it written into the approval of the application that they're required to start work at a certain time and by a certain date and or complete work by a certain date? Is that ever part of our project approvals?
No, we have the general construction hours for the city, and then also the time for the design review expiration date where they have to file a building permit within a year's time or file for an extension. But those are the only time constraints, yeah.
Strictly speaking, the building code, they have to get an inspection every 6 months. That's a pretty slow, you can really stretch out a building permit should that be necessary.
Okay, yeah. And not to say that would happen, that stretching out would happen in this case, but I just to clarify for my sake and the public's. Thank you. All right, we have no other public comments. And so do we have any comments from the commissioners at this time? would like to go first. I'm sure Commissioner Donaldson.
Okay, so you're asking for commissioner comments now on the project overall, is that right? Yeah, okay. Well, to me, I guess the most significant feature or maybe advantage of this project is the way that it deals with the watercourse district and the FEMA map and the floodplain. And I'm really pleased to see that the building is outside of our 20-foot setback. And I'm really pleased to see that the applicant is raising the building 3 feet to take it outside of the FEMA floodplain level. And that should make things simpler for them. And I think it certainly makes things simpler for us. These projects in our watercourse district are really difficult for us when they get close to the creek. I acknowledge Commissioner McCog's comments on the deck, but I looked at it as something that's existing and isn't proposed to be modified as a part of the project. I do recall the project across the street where we had an existing deck that had posts going down, and we did ask that it be cantilevered. But a bigger issue there for me was that part of the house that was going to be expanded was actually in the creek watercourse overlay district. And this design is one that sort of shoehorns around that boundary, and I applaud the applicant for that. And then beyond that, I recognize their approach of taking the existing building and working with it as well as they can. And I think the design is improved. It's a very boxy building to start out with and not really terribly attractive, but this certainly helps. And having the entrance on the ground floor helps a lot. The balcony and porch on the front is good. Frankly, I think I'm okay with leaving the parking situation the way it is. With the two spots, with the two driveways, curb cuts. But I would defer to other commissioners if they have issues about that, and be interested in hearing what you have to say. So basically, I support the project, and I'm really pleased with the way that it deals with our challenging watercourse district regulations. Thank you. Mm-hmm.
Thank you. Commissioner Waddy.
Thanks. I echo much of what Commissioner Donaldson said on this, and sort of starting first on the deck issue. It is ironic. We had a very, very analogous conversation for the property directly across the street. I think it was 1145, the same architect on this. And I remember there was much debate about it, and the position that I made on that was it's an existing deck. And when there's an existing deck that kind of has a non-conforming situation, hanging over the setback or whatnot, but the project itself, wasn't really having sort of a net horizontal increase into that space, I was fine with it. So in that same vein, the fact that there's an existing deck, that is within the setback, that's not bothersome to me. And similarly appreciate the fact that all of the new construction that's being proposed, attached to the building is properly within all the setbacks. Sort of making some analogies to the comments or the principles that I mentioned in the design review prior to this project. To me, the end product here from an architectural design review is an improvement over the existing architecture. This one has a much lower bar to start with. The existing building is not, I would say, one of our architectural gems in the city in contrast, but the new construction is also contemporary of its time and of a high quality architecture. There's also very little net new massing, I think, perceived from the street relative to the existing building. Obviously, a nominal increase in height to accommodate that floodplain, but not something that I think the average person would really perceive as a change from the front massing wise. In terms of the ADU, I just sort of want to put it on the record for folks, especially members of the public. It's really not an issue we can opine on. The state establishes how big those can be and what the parameters are relative to that. And so that's something that, although disclosed on the plans, is not an aspect that's under our purview for review. Lastly, when it comes to the parking, I'm similarly sitting on the fence with Commissioner Donaldson on this one. You know, as I mentioned in the last project, you know, if a curb cut is being modified or changed such that it's decreasing on-street parking, I do have an issue with that. However, I think in this instance, it's existing. You know, whether we allow it to be retained and allow somebody to park in the front setback or not, the same amount of on-street city parking available to members of the public remains the same. To me, it's more one of aesthetics of, you know, do we want that northern space to be dedicated to somebody parking a car there with hardscape, or would we rather that be landscaping? I probably lean a little bit more towards landscaping, but to me, the bigger issue is there's not really a net negative in terms of on-street parking spaces for the public as a result of this project. So that's all in all where I land on the project, and I'm supportive of being able to vote to approve it moving forward. Thanks.
Okay, Commissioner McLeod.
Yeah, I appreciate this project a lot. It's a vast improvement over the existing building. I think we can all agree on that. You know, and I think, you know, looking at the plan, it looks like it will be a very attractive place to live. I think it's, you know, a little bit of a challenging site with the creek, and I appreciate that they've made a good faith effort to pull the building all the way back to the 20 feet. And the other existing uses, all that are already there, well, it's just the way it is. That's fine. So leave them, and I'm not overly concerned about the two curb cuts. And then I think you know, I don't think we as a body need to require any prescriptive easement or anything. I think that's more of a matter between the two homeowners, the two adjacent homeowners in the city of Berkeley, and that's kind of at our applicant's risk to count on using the neighbor's property to pass onto their property with their vehicles. I think that's more of an item between the neighbors to work out. I do like the south-facing facade a lot. I think it's nice to have a lot of glass there. It would be, you know, very pleasant to be looking out at the creek, and hopefully they can address some of the concerns for privacy with the southern neighbor by maybe planting some trees or shrubs somewhere in between the two properties. So, you know, it seems like it's going to be a very pleasant place to live. I'm all for it. That's it.
Okay, I'll chime in with my comments. And we might have to move to continue just for a little while in a moment, but let's see. Actually, why don't, before I get started, can someone move that we continue, say, to 10:15 or so, or 10:30?
I'll move we continue to 10:15.
Okay.
I'll second.
Yeah. Okay. Is there any dissension or abstention from that? Okay. Otherwise, we'll approve that. Okay, we'll approve to 10:15. So for my comments, yeah, certainly there will, that is the northern pad can be used for cars. I take exception to the fact that modern cars are smaller. And in fact, modern cars are getting gosh darn huge, but certain ones are small and could fit in there. And, you know, landscaping would be nicer than hardscape, but it is an existing condition. That there's a curb cut there. So I'd rather if people want to have private motor vehicles, I'd rather see them on their private property, frankly. And I don't care about losing on-street parking places because that's public property that we give over to private car parking and parking the private vehicles. So people want to dedicate their land to parking motor vehicles, go for it. I'd say we should check the permits for that deck very carefully to make sure that they are you know, that all checks out and that we haven't messed up anything, that there's no legal irregularities there. Otherwise, we'll assume it's an existing deck. I would be in favor of bringing the parking all the way into Albany. It was requested by the neighbor, and it just doesn't seem, it seems very easy to do, and why would you spill over into Berkeley? So I think I will ask to make that a condition that we bring the parking completely into Albany. And finally, I'll note, once again, we can't really opine on this, except that I'm going to opine on the fact that the architect might want to consider that one of the bedrooms is right next to the living room of the main house. One of the ADU bedrooms borders the living room of the main house. And that would be unhappy making for me as an ADU resident, but it's entirely up to the architect and the applicant. So with that, I'll ask if there's any, Director Bond, please.
Yeah, I just wanted to address the deck issue. I had a moment to refresh my memory. And indeed, the permits were pulled for that. There was an older existing deck. The property owner began some repairs. We were advised of that and worked with them. We also consulted with FEMA to make sure the work was in compliance with their regulations, which it was. And so ultimately, they did get a building permit for that deck replacement.
Okay, thank you for clarifying that and verifying that. Okay, are there any further comments? If not, I'm prepared to make a motion. Okay, go ahead, Commissioner Donaldson.
Oh, I was just going to move. Do you want to move? Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I was going to move because I was going to ask that we move the design review and parking exception for a single-story rear addition at 1146 11 Avenue, PA 22-038, that we move, that we approve the project with the condition that the southern driveway be entirely within the city of Albany. Do I have a second? Okay.
Well,
I'm happy to make a counter motion since I don't feel like we have to necessarily do that. So I'm
okay.
happy to move the same application as proposed with staff recommendation.
I'll second. Mm-hmm.
Okay, and we have a second for that one. So that motion takes precedent. Actually, the first motion dies for lack of a second anyway. So we will go ahead and vote on the motion to approve the project as brought forward to us. Are there any no votes or abstentions? If not, then it's unanimously approved 4-0. And are there story poles associated with this project?
No.
Okay. All right. Very good. Thank you. And that concludes our regular business then. And item 8 on the agenda is new business, of which there is none. Next meeting is the special meeting of Tuesday, July 19th, but note that Monday, Tuesday, July 18th, the City Council will be voting on the San Pablo Avenue specific plan. And any further announcements before we adjourn? If not, I thank everybody and we are adjourned, and good night.